Hey everyone, welcome back to Naruto Audio Fanfics 2.0. Today's fanfic is, what if Naruto was abandoned by his family, and Mikoto Uchiha became his true mother? Part 1. A story full of action, emotions, secrets, and unexpected twists that will change Naruto's destiny forever. If you enjoy Naruto fanfics, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now sit back, relax, and let's begin the story. Uzumaki Kushina, the Akai Chishio no Habanero, was known as many things not only throughout Konohagakure no Sato, the village she resided in, but throughout the elemental nations. To her enemies she was strong, dauntless, and unpredictable. To those that know her personally she was all those things, and much more. She was stubborn when fixated on a purpose, impulsive when swayed by her emotions, and quick to lash out if anyone angered her. Right now, however, she was a few things: very hungry, very bored, and very pregnant. I'm so bored and hungry, thought one Uzumaki Kushina as she sighed and rubbed her big belly. Kushina had been pregnant for the last 9 months, and was hoping that today would be the day she would finally give birth and start her own family. She already knew what the baby would be as she had been given that information on one of her daily checkups. It was going to be a boy. She had been ecstatic when she had found out, and had to be restrained at the time from moving around so as to not unnecessarily injure herself or the baby. She had calmed down immediately when the threat of injury was brought up. She would not take any risks with Naruto. That was the name that had been decided upon by herself and her husband. Uzumaki Naruto, that has a nice ring to it. Then again, so does Namikaze Naruto, she thought absent-minded, as she sounded out each name. Namikaze, that was a name that was synonymous with one person, the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato. While not many knew of it, the red-headed Uzumaki had indeed been in a secret relationship with the blonde Namikaze. They had met only briefly in their academy days, and had not had much interaction with one another. However, after Kushina had been kidnapped by Kumogakure, the blonde Namikaze had went, and had succeeded in his rescue. It was history after that. They had been engaged a few years after the Third Shinobi World War, Daisanji Ninkai Taisen, and had married only shortly after she had found out she was pregnant. Grumble. She had been brought out of her reminiscing moment by the gurgle of her stomach. Hee hee, whoops, guess I forgot I was hungry. Well, I guess I'm making a trip over to Ramen Ichiraku for some lunch, thought Kushina as she laughed at herself for forgetting. As she was making her way down the street towards her destination, she kept passing various amounts of businesses that were trying to sell their wares. None had really caught her attention as she was more focused on getting her stomach full until something caught her eye. She slowed her pace down enough to check out the store in question. It was a clothing store, but for babies. I'll just take a quick peek inside, thought the Uzumaki, as she entered the store. She entered the establishment and noticed that the place had a wide variety of different selections to choose from. She was just browsing through some clothes that were more to her liking as they were things she would wear if they made them a few sizes bigger. She was brought out of her scrummaging as she saw something dark out of the corner of her eye. She turned her head to see what it was and noticed it wasn't a what, but a who. It was her best friend, Uchiha Mikoto. Kushina had always had a friend-rival relationship with the woman as they had always competed with each other. She was her best friend, but she was also the person she wanted to beat the most. As it was, Mikoto was ahead of her as she already had 2 children while she was going for her first. Hey there Mikoto-chan, shouted Kushina, here buying some baby clothes for Sasuke-chan? Asked Kushina, as she made her way over to the woman. The Uchiha woman had been startled when she heard her name shouted at her in a store and was about to scold whoever had done it. When she turned around and saw the strands of fiery red hair, she already knew who it was. It's nice to see you to Kushina-chan, replied Mikoto, and you shouldn't shout in a store as that is rude to the other patrons, scolded the Uchiha. Kushina blushed crimson as she realized what she had done, and was now trying to shrink away from the eyes now staring at her. Oops. Sorry about that, muttered Kushina, embarrassed. It's fine Kushina, just be more aware of your surroundings and those that are in them, said the Uchiha, and yes, I am here to buy some more clothes for little Sasuke, she answered. While the two women were silently conversing with each other, completely unaware of the few women who were staring at them both. They couldn't help but stare enviously at both women, as they were considered two of the most beautiful women in the whole village. These two were the epitome of what the civilian and kunoichi were striving to be, beautiful but deadly. The Uchiha woman had fair skin with long black hair with bangs hanging on either side of her face to frame her cheeks along with her onyx eyes. She roughly stood at 5 feet 3 inches. The Uzumaki stood just a bit taller than her counterpart at 5 feet 4 inches with fair skin, but a slender yet feminine build. Violet eyes and crimson red hair framed her face, giving her an exotic look that just personified her beauty. "So what kind of clothes are you looking into?" asked Kushina. I don't really know," confessed Mikoto. "I came to buy a few shirts for Sasuke, but I can't seem to make up my mind," said Mikoto, as she was torn between a blue shirt or a black one. "Hehe, you should be more organized like me, Mikoto-chan," said the redhead smugly. "I already have baby clothes for Naru-chan all set up and ready to go," said Kushina with a confident smirk on her face, believing she had outdone her rival. Mikoto simply stared at her friend, and smiled at her ignorance and naive attitude. "Kushina, let me give you a piece of advice from a mother who has experience in raising a child," said Mikoto. "Newborn children are always going to need things in quantity, even when you believe you have enough, it isn't," explained Mikoto, as she broke the news to her friend. Quote. "Oh, of course I knew that. I was just testing you to see if you knew that," replied a stuttering and embarrassed Kushina. Mikoto smiled softly at her friend's flustered state. "So what are you in here to buy, Kushina-chan?" asked Mikoto. "Well, I grumble." Her stomach gurgled yet again, clearly upset with not getting any food yet. Quote. Kushina looked absolutely mortified while Mikoto was chuckling awkwardly. "Quiet you," thought Kushina, silencing her stomach and praying it did not happen again. Mumbled Mikoto. I was actually on my way to get some lunch before I stopped in here, would you care to join me?" quickly asked Kushina, as she wanted to leave the store so as to not attract any more attention. "Lunch sounds great. Just give me a few seconds to buy these things, and then we'll head out," answered Mikoto, and went to buy her things. Both women were making their way over to the ramen stand, and were a few feet away when two boys of the same age had stopped in front of them. Kushina instantly recognized both boys, as she used to take care of both of them when they were just a bit younger than what they are now. Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Shisui. She remembered when she had sent over the boys' birthday presents for their 5th birthday. She couldn't make it that day because of a day at the doctor for her pregnancy. "Good afternoon, Mikoto-sama," Kushina-sama greeted the first boy with a goofy grin on his face. The other boy was shaking his head in exasperation at his friend's somewhat formal greeting. While still respectful, he did not believe it was enough. He lined up his feet, straightened his back, held up his chin looking them in the eye, and then bowed. "Good afternoon, Kushina-sama, and to you as well, Ka-sama," said the still bowing boy. Kushina looked at both boys, and couldn't help but be amazed. They both hailed from the same clan, but they were both polar opposites of each other. Both had jet black hair, onyx eyes, and fair skin. That was where the comparisons stopped though. Itachi was growing a ponytail while the front of his hair was well kept and framed his face. Shisui on the other hand had short, unkempt hair, along with a broad nose and some rather well-defined eyelashes. "So what are the two of you doing out here?" asked Mikoto, since neither had given a reason as to why they were there. "We were actually looking for you and Sasuke," answered Itachi. "Yeah, we came looking for you so we could play with Sasuke-chan, right, Itachi?" asks Shisui looking at his friend. Itachi sighed while shaking his head when he heard the answer as to why they were really there. He could hear the snickering coming from the two women in front of him, and sighed even louder when his mother told him that Sasuke was at home with his father. He noticed that the redhead had stopped, controlled herself and took a knee in front of them. "Can I ask the both of you for a favor?" asks Kushina looking each both in their eyes. Both gave her a nod, and she continued. "You can both see that I'm going to have a baby, right?" she asks as both boys give her a nod. "I want you two to be big brothers to Naruto," she said. Quote dot dot dot. I am afraid I don't follow. Questioned Itachi, as Shisui also looked rather confused as well. What I mean is for the both of you to look out for him, play with him when you can, beat up anyone who picks on him, like a big brother should. Naruto isn't going to be like Sasuke, who has you to watch over him, Itachi. So would you both do me this favor? Asked Kushina, explaining herself. Both boys were stunned speechless as they weren't expecting for her to ask them that. To be asked to be big brothers to another child, and one whose mother had looked after them or played with them when they were kids. They did not take long with their answers. I would like that very much, Kushina-sama, replied Itachi with a smile on his lips. Yash, you can count on me as well, Kushina-sama. I'll be the best big brother to Naruto-chan in the whole village. I'll protect him till the day I die, shouted Shisui while grinning while Itachi nodded his head, for once agreeing with his friend. Kushina had been a bit taken aback with his last statement, but smiled warmly at the boys. Thank you, Shisui-kun. Itachi-kun, I know I can count on the two of you, she said, and gave both boys a big warm hug. Both boys had returned the hug. They finally broke free from each other while helping Kushina get back on her feet, and said they would let both of them get on with their business. Both boys went back to the Uchiha compound. With both boys gone, the two ladies had resumed their walk once again. Mikoto noticed her friend squirming a bit as she walked, but said nothing about it. Mikoto-chan. Yes, she replied. What is it, Kushina-chan? Quote dot dot dot. Spit it out, yelled Mikoto, finally losing her patience. Is it going to hurt when I give birth? Blurted out Kushina. Quote dot 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 quote. Quote dot 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 quote. Wah. Don't tell me that the Akai Chishio no Habanero is scared of childbirth. Especially when you've done the things you've done over the years. Teased the Uchiha. Hey, I was just asking a question, don't make fun of me and make me hit you, TT Bane. Threatened Kushina while shaking her fist at her friend. Mikoto completely ignored her friend's outburst and casual threat. Hurt? No, of course it's not going to hurt, whatever gave you that idea? Sarcastically answered Mikoto. Kushina seemed to calm down a bit after hearing her friend's answer as she trusted the woman next to her completely. Grumble. Quote dot 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 quote. Quote dot 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 quote. Well, we're only a few feet away from the ramen stand, stuttered Mikoto, caught off guard by the loud noise Kushina's stomach had made. Kushina did not even bother to reply, and continued to try and shrink herself into her clothes to hide away from the stares. It seemed her stomach was fed up, and wanted to eat now. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they had finally arrived at their destination. They both took a seat at the stand, and were waiting to be helped. Kushina, what are you hoping Naruto turns out like? Mikoto asked suddenly. Kushina hummed and answered, I want him to be like me, a badass. She responded. Mikoto shook her head, and refrained from asking any more questions as they were going to place their orders. Mikoto ordered 1 bowl of chicken ramen while Kushina ordered multiple bowls, 5 bowls of miso ramen, and 5 bowls of shio ramen. Both variants of ramen had things that would be suitable for a pregnant woman: chicken, vegetables, and fish. Their orders had arrived a few minutes later, and they ate in silence. Once they had both finished, they had each paid for their food and had left the stand. Both had things they had to take care of, so they were each saying goodbye to the other. Splash. Kushina's water had finally broken. Silence, pure and utter silence throughout the entire street they were on. Oh shit, were the thoughts of both women. Kushina was starting to get extremely nervous, and began to panic. She barely heard her friend telling her to calm down until she passed out. Mikoto saw her friend had barely heard her voice, and quickly reacted once she saw her friend falling face first into the ground. She managed to grab her in time. Konoha Hospital. Kushina had finally been admitted into the hospital, and had thoroughly freaked out when she didn't know where she was. She had calmed down somewhat when she saw the hospital personnel, but began to freak out again when it finally hit her. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm finally going to have this baby, thought Kushina, as her heart was beating faster and faster. She was brought out of her mini freakout when she heard footsteps directly outside of her room's door. The door opened, and 2 people walked in, She knew one person as they had interacted with each other in the past couple of weeks, but she didn't know too much about the other person, all she had was a name. Sarutobi Bawako, wife of Sarutobi Hiruzen the Sandaime Hokage, was one of the midwives that would help deliver the baby. The other was a woman named Taji, and all Kushina knew about the women was her name and occupation, Anbu. Wait a minute here. 1, 2, 2. Where the hell is she at? Thought Kushina with her anger starting to rise. The third midwife that was going to help was none other than Senju Tsunade. Hailed as the greatest medical nin of all time, a member of the Densetsu no Sanin, related to Senju Tobarama and Senju Hashirama, and she was incredibly late. Where the hell is Tsunade at? Shouted Kushina, losing her cool. We don't know. We sent teams out to locate her and deliver a message asking her to be here for this. She finally replied after a few weeks saying she would be here as a favor to you, Kushina. Answered Bawako, explaining the situation with the missing Senju. Tsunade-sama. Tsunade-sama. I have a letter from Konoha. Said Shizune, the apprentice of Tsunade. Shizune was a fair-skinned woman with a slender build along with black eyes and hair. She hands her master the letter and was going to leave for a moment. The letter had only just reached the fingertips of Tsunade before it was sticking out of the trash. She was currently gambling and did not want to read anything that pertained to Konoha. Tsunade-sama, did you even read the letter? And what it pertained to? Questioned Shizune, hands on her hips. I didn't need to read it to know what it said or what they wanted. Answered Tsunade in a monotone voice as she stood up to leave as she had lost most of her money. Senju Tsunade is a light-skinned woman, brown eyes, and straight blonde hair that reached her waist and framed her face with 2 shoulder-length bangs. She also had possibly the largest bust in the ninja world at 106 centimeters, and has been hailed as the most beautiful kunoichi in the world. Shizune shook her head in disappointment at her master's attitude, and proceeded to inform her of what the letter actually said. It was a request to help deliver the child of Uzumaki Kushina. That's it? Questioned Tsunade. Yes, that's it. At best, you'll be in the village for a couple of hours, and at worst a few days, answered Shizune. Tsunade thought about it for a while and accepted the request. She would be there to help with the childbirth, as a favor to her distant Uzumaki relative. It was decided, and they both prepared to travel back to Konoha. End. That was a little over 2 weeks ago when they had received the reply, but the women had yet to show up, and Kushina was beginning her contractions. Suddenly everyone felt a presence enter the room, and were immediately on guard. However, Kushina smiled when she saw the yellow flash, already knowing who it was. The man in front of them was a fairly tall, fair-skinned man with bright blue eyes, and blonde spiky hair with 2 bangs framing his face. It was none other than Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage. Dawdled Minato, I heard you passed out when your water broke. Minato said, grinning. Kushina glared, and let out a growl at the man who was the father of her child. She could see him grinning like a madman, and was about to get up and stick her foot up his, but was stopped. As much as I would love to see you rip him a new one, don't you believe we should get things underway? Stated Bawako as she stood in the middle of the two. And what of Tsunade? Questioned Minato. She has yet to arrive. So we will have to start without her. Said Bawako as she heaved a sigh. Well, not much we can do about her now. Grab a hold of me, and we can get started at our new location. Said Minato, as they were moving to a different location in order for Kushina to give birth. The reason for this was because of the biju sealed within Kushina, or more specifically the Kyubi no Yoko. The seal placed on her would be weakest during childbirth as the energy needed to be redirected into something other than the child, and so as to not alert the villagers they were doing the delivery in a secret area that would mask any leaked chakra from the biju. Chamber of sealing. Ah! Screamed one Uzumaki Kushina. Remember your breathing exercises, and keep pushing. You're almost there, Kushina-sama. Spoke Taji, trying to calm the patient. I know that. I swear. That if I see Minato's face. I'm going to pound it in for what? He's putting me through. Minato had been kicked out of the room because he had been freaking out, and had started pace back and forth. Plus he needed to keep an eye on the seal holding the biju in. To hell with getting his face pounded in, he would be there for the birth of his son. It was one thing to pump himself up, but another thing entirely as he was not even in the room yet. He opened the door to the room with the presence of a hardened warrior, and immediately withered under his wife's demonic glare. He was no censor, but he could still feel an assortment of emotions rolling off of her. They were all directed at his person, and they mostly consisted of bodily harm. Now Kushina, I'm sure it isn't that bad. Very poor choice of words. What did you just say? Asked Kushina in the calmest tone she had before the birthing had begun. I said, I know what you said, you idiot. You have some, nerve saying that to me when you don't even know the pain I'm in. Damn you Namikaze Minato, for what you're putting me through. He had no answer to her claims. He did not know the pain she was going though, he had assumed it hadn't hurt that much, but to damn him, wasn't that a bit much? I knew I should have created a seal to counteract the pain. The drugs the doctors gave me aren't enough. I was just so happy about having a family that I forgot to create it. Quote. He still didn't understand how any of this was fault. He may have been the one to knock her up, but that shouldn't have distracted her from making it. He was too busy with his own work to make one, so yep, it was definitely not his fault. Don't give me that look. And keep those thoughts to yourself. What in the name of Uchiha Madara, how had she known what he was thinking? Must be a latent ability of a pregnant woman. To be able to discern their husband's thoughts. Minato, are you even listening to, me? Quote. Yes, I swear, if you were thinking, something idiotic about me. Threatened Kushina with a balled up fist shaking at her husband. No Kushi-chan, I wasn't thinking that at all. My god, what willpower this woman had. To give birth while berating and threatening him, that definitely had to be an Uzumaki thing. It felt like they had been speaking for hours, yet she had still not given birth. You're doing it. Again aren't you? Quote. Minato oh. And there it was. With that scream alone, they all knew that the baby would be coming any second now. Bawako kept telling her to push and push, to give it everything she had and then some. Her breathing had become heavier, and she was now taking a few seconds in between each breath. Minato had seen some stuff in his life, but this took the prize. What he had witnessed was a miracle given life. And that's when he heard it, the best sound he had ever heard in his life. Waahhhh. The sound of a baby crying, his baby. He too found himself shedding his own tears, he was now a father. Shish, said Taji soothingly, trying to calm the baby down. Congratulations Kushina-sama, Minato-sama. You have a healthy baby boy. Once both parents saw him, all they felt was love. Naruto, their son, had inherited the majority of Minato's blonde hair, but when they looked closer they could see little red wisps. He had also inherited his father's strikingly blue eyes. However, he looked more like his mother more than anything. Taji then proceeded to give the baby to his mother. As if Naruto knew he was in loving hands, he stopped his crying, and looked up at his mother with his blue eyes, and gurgled. My baby, my precious baby boy, repeated Kushina as she was gently holding him in her arms. May I hold him, Kushina? Asked Minato. She actually seemed to think on it, and had wanted to outright refuse him, but had relented. Of course, but be careful with him. Support his head gently. Instructed Kushina, as this information had been drilled into her by Bawako. Hey there little guy, I'm your daddy, softly spoke Minato. He got a little baby yawn, it was just the most adorable thing he had ever seen. Excuse me Minato-sama, but may I have baby Naruto back for a few seconds? I need to measure his height and weight for his birth certificate, spoke Taji. Oh, right, here you go, said Minato, handing over his son. Thanks, I'll be done in a few seconds. Squelch. Waahhhh. Cried baby Naruto, as someone different was holding him. Both parents shot their heads to the sounds of their child, and the familiar sound of blood hitting the ground. They both froze at what they saw, a masked man holding their son with a kunai pointed at his neck along with two bodies behind the man. Taji and Bawako were dead. Minato made to move, and beat the man with his superior speed, but the man threatened to kill the child before he could reach him. Then it happened. It all happened with the span of a few seconds. One moment, Minato was standing next to his wife, but now he was holding his child in his hands. He quickly noticed the exploding tags attached to his son's blanket, took it off, and flashed away to his home to secure his son. He had left his wife alone. Kushina. She was trying her hardest not to get teary-eyed as her son had been taken away, but her anger took over for her, and was directed at the masked man. What do you want? She yelled, trying to sound intimidating. To destroy Konoha. What? Why? How? Do you plan on doing that? Kushina said in between breaths after the birth. Simple really. I'm going to rip the Kyuubi from your gut, and release him upon the village, thus destroying it. Now Kushina was a bit frightened, and was about to speak before the man placed his hand on the seal that was on her belly. No. The seal had pulsed for a brief second before a primal roar pierced the heavens, and shook the very earth itself. Roar. The Kyuubi no Yoko had been released from its seal, and placed under the control of the masked man. You've done your part, Uzumaki Kushina, now watch as I burn Konoha to the ground, said the masked man, and he disappeared. He assumed the woman was going to die of blood loss and shock from having the biju forcibly extracted. A few seconds later Minato reappeared. Ina! Kushina! Yelled Minato as he re-entered the sealing chamber. Minato had arrived only to see wife breathing coming out heavy and hoarse. She was still alive, and that's all that mattered right now. He noticed the man from before was gone, and was going to soon give chase as he already knew what was going on. The biju had been released from its seal, as he could feel its foul chakra. He needed to hurry before the biju reached the village. He already knew what he was going to do, but he would ensure that they would never be alone in this world. He lightly touched his wife and disappeared in a yellow flash. Minato's secret house. Minato and Kushina had arrived at his secret safe house, located just behind the Hokage mountain. He placed his wife in a bed. Knowing her, she's going to try and get up and fight with me, thought Minato with a sad smile. That is not something I can allow to happen. One of us needs to guide our son, and that will be you, Kushina. Fuinjutsu. Ikaime Keke, sealing technique, living barrier. He placed a few seals around her bed and sealed her within a barrier that was tied to his chakra, so when his ran out, then it would run out. He looked at his wife one last time, and left to deal with the threat to his family and home. Kushina. Gasp. Kushina awoke with a gasp for air, and settled back down on her bed. She quickly took in a breath of air and calmed herself down. She opened her eyes, and was now confused as she did not recognize the place she had been placed in at first. She realized that she was in Minato's home when not staying in the Uzumaki compound. She tenderly got up out of the bed, and searched around the home. Finding nothing of importance, she ventured towards the door, and opened it to find herself outside. She looked around, and noticed that many things had been destroyed along with trees being uprooted all around the area. She suddenly froze as she saw something that is going to haunt her for the rest of her life. Lying there on the floor just a few feet away from her was her husband with a gaping hole in the middle of his body. She saw this, and despite the pain she was feeling, she rushed over to his down form. She reached him, and began to shake him while tears were falling down her face. She tried and tried, but realization hit her. Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, was dead. As she was crying, she managed to hear a very faint sound off in the distance, so she got herself up, and found her son in a basket crying. Her son was alive. She quickly grabbed him, and started to cry along with him until she saw the seal that had faded from his little belly. Then everything hit her. She knew just what had happened. Her husband had sealed the biju inside of their son. That was why he was dead, as she knew he only knew of one way to seal the Kyuubi. He had used the Shiki Fujin along with the Hake no Fuin Shiki. She looked at her son, and knew things would be difficult if news ever got out that he was the new Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, and she assumed that was why she was alive, so as to not only protect him, but guide him as well. She then noticed two concealed letters, one for herself and Naruto, but before she could hope to read hers, someone called out to her. She turned expecting one person, but was surprised when there were two. Sarutobi Hiruzen was striding over to her location while one of his students trailed him. She would have thought it to be Jiraiya, but instead it was Senju Tsunade. Finally getting over her mild surprise, she questioned why both teacher and student had arrived after the damage had finally been done. She heard their answers, but neither appeased her and she began to recount just what she could remember of the situation at their behest. Listen Kushina, I'm sorry for the loss of your husband, but I need to know what happened to the Biju. Pressed Hiruzen, as he needed to know the situation in case it was still loose. Kushina did not hesitate for 1 second before answering, it was sealed by Minato. He sealed it inside of himself and took it with him into the belly of the Shinigami, lied Kushina. Both were surprised, but none more than Hiruzen. He looked into the woman's eyes to see if he could find any deceit, but found none. He then looked to the child in her arms and saw nothing. No seal anywhere on the body nor were there any traces of the Biju's influence. I see, said Hiruzen sighing at the whole situation. What do you plan to do now? He asked. I plan on raising my son to the best of my ability while leading him to greatness, stated Kushina with a conviction in her voice. Hiruzen nodded at the women, and then asked her another question. What's the lad's name? He questioned. Kushina easily read between the lines, his name is Uzumaki Naruto of the Uzumaki clan. I see. Will he ever take his father's name? Perhaps. I will let him decide when he's older or if he finds out himself. Whichever comes first, answered Kushina, as she was now starting to feel the effects of the pain on her body. Listen Hiruzen, I'm taking my son home. We need to rest after the ordeal we have been put through today. If you need any more questions answered then you may ask me tomorrow, said Kushina, before gripping her child a bit tighter, and began walking back to her home. She stopped halfway. Tsunade? Asked Kushina in a tired voice. Yes. Can I talk to you? Come by the house tomorrow. I have something I need to ask you. Just ask me now. I might only be in the village until tomorrow anyway, replied Tsunade, as she did not wish to see more blood and carnage. Kushina stared at the women, and was trying to figure out if she was being serious or not. Would she really just leave when so many were injured and in need of her skills? Walk with me then. Okay, she said as she caught up with the redhead, so what did you want to ask me? I wanted to know if you were interested in becoming our family's personal doctor. She asked suddenly. Why would I want to do that? I mean, don't get me wrong. I consider you family regardless of how distant, but why would I want to stay in this village? Questioned Tsunade, surprised at the out of the blue offer. Well, you do kind of owe me for not being here on time. And had you been here, things might have been different, reasoned Kushina, while trying to guilt her into staying. Look, I'm sorry for your loss, but this village has taken too much from me, and I just can't stay here, answered Tsunade as truthfully as she could. Look, I don't care if you want to leave the village to go and do your own thing, but when I have need for you, I want you to be there. I will offer you and your apprentice a place to live while paying you for your services. How does that sound? Quote. Tsunade bit her lip as she was seriously considering the offer. It would be nice for herself and her apprentice to finally settle down for a bit. Plus she could still leave and do her own thing or when she just didn't want to be in the village for a while. Deal, said Tsunade reaching to shake on it. Deal, replied Kushina doing the same thing, and shook hands. They both walked back to the Uzumaki compound awaiting what was to come in the following years. 3 years later. 3 years had come and gone since that fateful day 3 years ago. The village itself had undergone some changes since that day. New buildings had been built for the ones that had been destroyed, new procedures had been put in place in case of another disaster, and the naming of a Hokage. Kushina remembered that day very well as she had been in the populace when it had been announced that Hiruzen Sarutobi would resume his duties as Hokage once more. She heard his explanation on just what had transpired that night, and how the Yondaime had sealed the beast within himself and taken it with him to the grave. She of course took in all of the reactions the populace had, and most seemed to buy it, so that was at least one thing she did not have to worry about. Nobody would suspect her son, nor would she let them. She had read the letter that had been addressed to herself all those years ago, and it gave her more information on just what had really happened. She had only known bits and pieces, but now she knew it all. Her husband had fought a man who he believed to be the legendary Uchiha Madara, as the man had shown he had a fully matured Sharingan. She had read on, and found out that he had only sealed half of the Biju into her son. He sealed the yin half of the fox into Naruto while sealing the yang in himself. He had also instructed her to begin his training as soon as she could, as there will be enemies who will seek to use or take the Biju from him, or in fact use him as a weapon. She had also taken up a seat on the council as head of the Uzumaki clan. She would need information on just what the most powerful people in the village were planning. However, she would only take up that mantle until Naruto was old enough to look after himself. Speaking of her son, she had to say that she was honestly surprised by her son. He was quiet most of the time and chose to focus his thinking on certain things. Granted, he was just 3 years old, but it was still quite something to see. He was always reading, and trying to learn new things while his idea of fun was solving some puzzles. She had been a bit concerned about him, as she would have thought he would have been a regular ball of energy, like she was as a child. However, the more she thought about it, the less she worried, as his father was the same way. The only real friends he had were people that were much older than him. She could name them on one hand: Tsunade, Kakashi, and Shizune. They were the only people who really knew who Naruto's father was. She only really considered 2 people close to his age bracket. Uchiha Itachi and Shisui had taken her asking them for a favor very seriously. They would come over almost every other day to just hang out or play with Naruto. Naruto enjoyed their company very much. She had tried to get Naruto to hang around people his own age, but things never seemed to click. Naruto would always say they were too stupid to understand some of the things he tried explaining to them. However, regardless of how he acted to others his age or how he acted just around herself, she still loved him with all of her heart. She would begin his training soon, as he will need to know how to protect himself. 3 years later. 3 years had come and gone since Naruto had begun his training under various teachers. Some skills had taken him longer to master, but he had eventually gotten them down. He was currently awaiting for his next 2 senseis. He briefly thought back to his first lesson with his mother while he was waiting. Flashback. Okay, Naruto, today I'm going to start your training. Now I want you to understand that this is going to be a lengthy process, and what you learn today needs to be practiced for the remainder of the year. Am I understood? Said Kushina, with a sweet smile on her face. Why, yeah, understood, Ka-chan, replied the 4-year-old. Good. Now I want you to take a seat on the ground, and cross your legs as well. I'm going to have you unlock your chakra, explained Kushina as she instructed him. Naruto proceeded to follow her instructions and sat down on the ground while crossing his legs. He looked up to his mother, further awaiting her orders. First off, answer me this. What is chakra? Chakra is the molding of the physical energy present in every cell of the body, and the spiritual energy gained from exercise and experience, stated Naruto, with pinpoint accuracy. Word for word from what you read, huh? Yep, he replied with a smile. Alright, now I want you to close your eyes and focus deep within yourself, she said, watching him close his eyes and began to concentrate. Next, she continued, you're going to feel an energy source within yourself flowing throughout your entire body. I want you to grab that energy, and bring it to the surface, she said, as she was patiently watching. Confusion was written over Naruto's face. Seeing the confused face on her son, she decided to find out what was wrong. What's wrong, Sochi? Can you not locate your chakra? She asked. No, I found it, but it's strange. What is? There are 2 energies for me to grab. One is blue and warm, while the other is red and malicious, explained Naruto, not really knowing what was going on. Quote. Kushina froze when he mentioned the second type, and immediately knew what it was. She would need to tread carefully here. Naruto, she spoke softly, I want you to grab the blue and warm feeling. Don't touch that other one, I will teach you about it, but not right now. Okay. She spoke slowly. Okay. I'm going to grab the first one, he replied. Kushina just watched as her son was concentrating, and saw a faint bluish outline on her son appear all around him, and knew he had done it. Congratulations Naruto, you've successfully unlocked your chakra, said Kushina, as she went up and gave him a hug. Thanks Ka-chan. You're welcome. Would you like to take a break or do you wish to continue? She asked already knowing his response. I can keep going. He replied with a fire in his eyes. Right. Well know that you have your chakra unlocked, we need to work on your control. Okay. What do I have to do? Questioned Naruto, looking at her. Well, first I'm going to place this leaf on your forehead and I want you to apply chakra to that leaf so it doesn't fall off. Okay. Is that all I'm going to be doing today? Queried Naruto. She thought. No, I am going to be teaching you how to handle and throw shuriken, kunai, ninja wire etc. That will be your training schedule until I say otherwise, she said in a tone that meant it was not up for debate. Fine, he said sighing, so I work on my chakra control, and practice with my shuriken and kunai, he said making sure he heard right. That's correct. Flashback end. That had been his first year of training. Nothing but pure chakra control along with training in his ninja tools. It was only until the second year that things really began to take off for him. Flashback. Okay Naruto, I know you've been learning how to scout out an area, and track a persons from Kakashi. From what he's told me, you excel at the things most shinobi tend to neglect. I'm proud of you, said Kushina as she praised her son. Thank you Ka-chan, replied Naruto, giving her one of his rare smiles. You're welcome. Now I'm going to teach you some useful techniques, she said, as she could see him shaking with anticipation. Which ones? They are 3 basic techniques, but will be useful out in the field. They are the henge, kawarimi, and the bunshin, she said, as she explained what each did. Wow! Was all Naruto said, as he was left speechless at hearing what they did. Hee, I knew you would be impressed, chuckled Kushina watching her son's reaction. When can I get started? He asked in anticipation. Soon, but there is one thing I want to tell you, said Kushina, rather seriously. What is it? Along with your physical training and chakra control exercises, these are the only things you're going to be learning. I want you to have these mastered before we move on to something else, she said, as she explained that having something mastered could be the difference between living or dying. Now, she continued, I'm just going to give you the specifics of what your physical training will work on. Endurance, stamina, speed, pain tolerance, strength, power, flexibility, agility, coordination, balance, and accuracy, she listed off. Once Naruto heard this he understood, and wanted to get his training underway. Oh Naruto, have you been waiting long? Asked one Uchiha Itachi in his weasel mask. No sensei, I was just thinking. He replied. Very well then, let's wait until Dragon arrives before we begin, stated the older Uchiha. Okay. Naruto knew that behind those Anbu masks were his 2 elder Uchiha friends. It was a very sad but interesting day that day, as he not only learned some vital information about himself, but one of his friends as well. Flashback. What? Shouted Naruto in complete disbelief. Yes. Myself along with Shisui have been accepted into the ranks of the Anbu. I just wanted to let you know that if we do not appear around regularly it is because we are on a mission, and not because we do not like you anymore, explained Itachi in a monotone voice. However, what he did not tell the young blonde before him was that both Shisui and himself have already been in the organization for a while now, and their next mission was regarding him. Many attempts had been made by outside forces on either his life or his mother's. While his mother could protect herself, he could not. Well, not yet anyways, thought Itachi. Itachi along with Shisui had been assigned by the Hokage to watch over the boy at all times possible. They of course knew who the boy's father was as they needed to know such information, and understood why he needed a bit more protection. I see, replied Naruto, as he wrapped his head around the information he was just given. Will you come to see me when you have time? Asked Naruto in a whisper. Of course. Well, I really must get going, I just wished to relay our situation to you, said Itachi, as he made his way out, but not before greeting Naruto's mother. Hello Kushina-sama. Hello Itachi-kun, replied Kushina as she watched the boy leave. Hello Ka-chan, said a dejected Naruto. What's wrong Naruto? She asked in a worried tone. And so he began to explain what he had just been told, and she now understood why he was a bit depressed. She explained to him that if Itachi had not valued their friendship then he wouldn't have bothered to let him know. That made him feel a bit better, and got out of his mood. I see you are ready to train in the other things I have to teach you, stated Kushina, looking at Naruto. Naruto nodded his head as the past year had seen him training in the specifics of stealth and infiltration. He had asked her how she knew such things, and she said she was once briefly part of the Anbu, until she got pregnant, and left it at that. Those two things along with his physical training, and his new chakra control exercise, tree walking, had done wonders for him. He was wondering what she would teach him next. I'm going to teach you this technique I learned from one of my friends. It's called the Toten Jutsu, she said. What does it do? It renders the user invisible during combat, she explained. That sounds useful, replied Naruto, thinking of such ways to use it. It is Toten Jutsu, transparent escape technique. And before his very eyes, his mother had vanished. He was about to call out to her, but something stopped him, and he forced himself to the ground. It was quick, but he felt a change in the air current after he had dropped. You have good instincts, Naruto. You dodged that strike well, but never stop moving, she yelled. Naruto heard her tone of voice, and immediately got himself up and put his defense. It had little effect as Kushina could easily bypass it. She knocked him around a few times, and let himself get back up again. She was impressed with his durability, but then again he was an Uzumaki. Shit, cursed Naruto mentally. He needed to find out just where she was, but how? Unbeknownst to the two Uzumaki that were fighting, but there were two people watching them. It was two Anbu that had been watching since the beginning. One had a weasel mask on while the other had a dragon mask. What do you think, Itachi? Asked Dragon. How many times must I tell you? Don't call me by my name, sighed Itachi, shaking his head. Oops. I mean, what do you think? Weasel. Dragon spoke the last few words in a serious tone. I think he needs to do something quick or he will continue to be punched and kicked by his mother, answered Weasel as they both returned to watching. Damn it. I need to do something. I know, thought Naruto, as something came to him. He rolled once again as he felt the current in the air shift, but this time while on the ground, he snatched up a handful of dirt. He quickly got up and readied himself. When he felt the shift again, he threw the dirt. Hee. Nice try, Naruto. Something like that will not work on an opponent who is much faster than you, she explained to him, as she rounded on him once again. Oof, grunted Naruto as he focused his eyes as much as he could, hoping to find her. Might as well end this little demonstration, thought Kushina, but not before she could land one more hit. She balled her fist up, and was about to bring it down on top of his head when something incredible happened. He caught it. What the hell? Shouted Kushina in disbelief. Gasp. She couldn't believe it, but it couldn't be an illusion. Her son was looking at her not with his own eyes, but with the eyes of a different person. She was looking directly at a pair of Sharingan eyes. "Bu" were the last words on her mouth before she received a kick directly to her stomach, knocking the air out of her as she fell to the ground. Weasel and Dragon. They were both just as shocked as Kushina was. They couldn't believe that their friend had those eyes, it didn't make any sense. They needed more information before reporting this. Naruto and Kushina. Naruto looked directly at the downed form of his mother, and quickly ran towards her to check on her. Ka-chan, are you okay? I'm sorry, he repeated over and over again in worry. It's okay, Naruto. I just need to catch my breath, she said, never leaving his eyes. What's wrong? I think we need to call Tsunade, and give you a checkup, she responded. Oh man, and what a checkup that was, thought Naruto, thinking back to that day. After his checkup had been finished, they had taken a blood sample. It was obvious he had Uchiha blood flowing through his veins, but who had he received it from? His mother, or his father? From what the results had said when Tsunade had gotten them back, Naruto was 33% Uchiha, 33% Kagaya, and 34% Uzumaki. Who knew? Flashback. Really? Where did I get whose blood from? Asked Naruto, looking around the room. We would like to know that as well, thought both Itachi and Shisui, as they were hidden from view, still watching over Naruto. Well, started Tsunade, you received your Uzumaki blood from your mother, but you also received your Kagaya blood from her as well, stated Tsunade. Everybody was now looking at Kushina, waiting for an explanation. She told them that she was in fact half Kagaya on her mother's side. I see, said the busty Senju, well that answers that question. Which pretty much means you received your Uchiha blood from your father, and from what I've seen on the results, you're actually related to someone from that clan, she said out loud. Who is my father? And who am I related to? Naruto asked in rapid succession. Tsunade looked to Kushina before answering, and got a nod. Your father is or was, Namikaze Minato or Uchiha Minato, the late Yondaime Hokage. Shock, sadness, relief, anger, were the emotions that had been going on inside of Naruto when he finally got the news he had been waiting for. I see. He said. That's it, you see, spoke Tsunade as she believed the boy would have an outburst. What else do you want me to say? I finally have the answer to who my father was, but I do need time to adjust to it, he explained looking directly at the woman. Tsunade just nodded her head, and continued with her information, now as to who you are related to by way of your father. Your grandfather is Uchiha Kagami while his son Shisui would be your uncle, said Tsunade revealing the information. Gasp. What was that? Wondered Tsunade, as she thought she heard something. You need to control yourself, dragon, signed Weasel using hand gestures. Roger that. He signed back using the same gestures. Really? I'm related to Shisui, that's so cool, said Naruto, as he looked up to the older Uchiha boy. Naruto, spoke Kushina, getting his attention, you can't tell anyone about this. I understand the consequences, Ka-chan. I may be young, but I'm not stupid, retorted Naruto, as he subtly activated his dojutsu. He didn't know how or why, but he had very acute senses. He had only really used them on instinct when previously fighting his mother, but now he was doing it automatically. He had felt a shift in the air from somewhere in the room. He dared not move his head lest he give himself away. He was quickly scanning the lower half of the room, and then proceeded to move higher up. There. He finally saw them, it was two, but they seemed to be listening in on the conversation while completely ignoring him. So he has the battle instincts of the Kagaya, the body of an Uzumaki, and the dojutsu of the Uchiha. I must say, he has the makings of a great shinobi, stated Kushina, as everybody digested what she had just said. It was a very scary prospect. Just the Sharingan alone can make an individual dangerous, but coupled along with the vitality, stamina, and humongous chakra reserves of the Uzumaki and you have the makings of a powerhouse. Then add in the aptitude for battle from the Kagaya clan and it just make the word powerhouse seem obsolete. You do indeed have the makings of something great, Naruto-kun, spoke Shizune for the first time. Man, imagine if Naruto had the Shikatsunyaku. Kushina said to herself. Everyone, but Naruto, shivered at that thought. While those present in the room had never fought an actual user of that bloodline, they were still positive they would come out victorious, they were just unsure of what shape they would come out in. That is indeed a scary thought. Itachi thought to himself, as he was so engrossed that he never saw the pair of blood-red eyes staring straight at him. Itachi was now in a dilemma, as he was sure his friend was in as well. What do they exactly do with this information? If he gave it to the Hokage, the man would have no choice but to share it with the rest of the clan heads. While he was positive his father would not try anything being who the boy's mother was, but that did not mean others would not. Naruto's circumstances are too good to be true, and others would try to exploit the boy behind his mother's back. That dreaded CRA came to Itachi's mind, and he actually allowed his emotions to overtake him for a brief second. He was disgusted with how they treat any who were the last of their clan. He did not want that for Naruto, as he was responsible, along with Shisui, for acting as older brothers and taking care of him in ways only they could. If the information from this little meeting were to be exposed, it would set off a chain of events that would undoubtedly harm Naruto and Konoha in the short and long run. He did not want that, so for now, he would keep it to himself. Itachi turned to Shisui and could see the emotions raging within the man's eyes. It seemed he was not the only one with some internal strife. He was going to signal him for them to leave and wait when they came out, but noticed something that momentarily stopped his breathing. Two Sharingan eyes were staring directly at his position, and he knew they had been spotted. He noticed that Shisui had stiffened as he saw the blood-red eyes of their clan. Itachi briefly wondered if Naruto would reveal their locations. We made a rookie mistake, thought the fresh new Anbu shinobi as he was caught unaware. He breathed a sigh of relief as the boy had stopped applying chakra to his eyes, and turned his head in the opposite direction. Before he left though, Naruto gave him one last look, and Itachi had received the message. Itachi and Shisui disappeared immediately after that. Both Uchiha were in and around the canopy that surrounded the Uzumaki compound, and were awaiting their visitor. They had been waiting since they had left the hospital, which ended roughly 30 minutes ago. They did not wait much long as Naruto appeared not a few yards away from the trees that were hiding them. "You two can come out now," called out Naruto. The two seemed to hesitate at his casual demeanor as he called out to them. However, both knew they had to hear him out as he had not revealed them during the hospital visit. Neither doubted it would have looked bad on them, two Anbu spying on a kid and his mother, and even now it still looked bad as the boy's mother would not bother listening to either of them and take her own son's word over theirs. "We need to tread carefully here," Itachi told himself as he and Shisui dropped down. "Ah, there you are," said Naruto. "So it would seem," replied Itachi, trying to sound different. "What did you wish to discuss?" he asked. I already who you two are, so can you take off your masks already?" stated Naruto. Quote. Both men were shocked and had shown as much as their bodies went rigid. "And how do you know this?" asked Dragon. "Simple really. Who would the Hokage trust to keep an eye on me other than the two people who already know me and my habits, and two new Anbu, isn't that right?" Itachi, Shisui. Itachi merely shook his head and let out a small sigh. It seemed his friend was very astute. He did not think the little knowledge he had given him earlier would come back to haunt him. "You are correct. However, I must ask you call us by our code names. You may call me Weasel." "You sure are smart, Naruto, isn't he? I mean Weasel. By the way, you can call me Dragon." "Noted. Now I have a favor to ask of you two, since you two are the only two Uchiha that I know," said Naruto as he could tell both men had a raised eyebrow behind their masks. "And that is," replied Itachi, needing more information. "I want you two to train me in mastering my Sharingan." Flashback end. Naruto was smiling at those memories as he didn't think he could or ever would again surprise both Uchiha again. He had come to terms about that other piece of information regarding his father. He wasn't sure what to feel for the man. He held no hate for the man, but did not love him either. That's where his reasoning had led him. On one hand, the man had selflessly given his life for his village and understood his thinking at the time. However, he had left him without a father, a role model, a man to strive to emulate, and a friend. He had shed some tears for the man who was his father. However, that was where his feelings for the man stopped. He had no obligation to strive for, emulate, or surpass a dead man, and would instead strive to surpass his mother. He was brought out of his thoughts by a voice he recognized. "Yo, sorry I'm late. I forgot what time I was supposed to be here and overslept," said Dragon. Both Naruto and Itachi could tell he was telling the truth if his bedhead was any indication. Neither said anything and instead decided to ignore it for now. "Right, well, let's get this started. Naruto, welcome to Sharingan 101, informed Dragon, trying to lighten the mood. Naruto nodded his head at his friend. "Glad to be here. Now," he started, "from your knowledge, what can you tell me about the Sharingan?" "Not much," admitted Naruto. "Kinda the reason why I asked the two of you to help me. Not much information is open to me, due to it being a bloodline," he stated. "Plus, I can't just walk over to the Uchiha district and just ask for this information," he added, finishing his point. "This is true," said Shisui, knowing everything Naruto just said was correct. Indeed, added Itachi, completely agreeing with the blonde's assessment. Oka, was all Shisui said before getting cut off. Excuse me, dragon, interrupted Itachi. But I believe there is something we need to discuss before we can move any further with this training session. Shisui was surprised that the ever stoic Itachi had cut him off. And that is, Itachi turned his head, and looked directly at Naruto. I know you already know this, and have stated it, but I just want to restate it, spoke Itachi in a serious voice. Nobody must know of our involvement in this. Naruto already understood this, but reassured the teen with a nod of his head. Good, responded Itachi, and motioned for Shisui to continue. Now to begin again, before I was rudely interrupted. Since you have just unlocked your dojutsu, we will only explain what one tomo will allow you to do, said Shisui. No point in going into further detail when you aren't even there yet, he added. First off, took over Itachi. The Sharingan is only a tool, it alone will not make you unbeatable, he said, stressing this point. Many Uchiha have believed this, and have lost their lives as a result. Understood, replied Naruto in a serious tone, showing them he understood. He's right, agreed Shisui. Be sure to take that statement to heart. The eye itself allows you to see chakra flow while giving color to it. It will also allow you to tell if a person is under an illusion, and it gives the user a clearer perception of things. As your eyes continue to mature, so will these abilities, finished Shisui. Having at least one tomo in your eyes will allow you to at least copy hand movements, like pencil movement, to a degree, explained Itachi. Oh, I almost forgot, said Shisui in realization. No pair of eyes will ever have the same level of ability. Naruto arched an eyebrow as he was confused by this piece of information. What do you mean by that? What I mean is, for example, while all Sharingan eyes can cast genjutsu, some are just going to be much better at it, explained Shisui, who then turned to Itachi. Like him, for example, his eyes are much better at casting illusions than mine ever will. However, he continued, just because his are better doesn't mean I can't cast illusions either, his are just much stronger. My eyes allow me the use of high-level hypnotism, which is a form of genjutsu. He puffed his chest out when announcing his ability. Interesting, I did not know that each pair of eyes had their own unique skill, said Naruto, wondering what his would be. Leave it to Shisui to give away what our eyes can do, sighed Itachi, shaking his head and rubbing the bridge of his nose. I need to stop this now. I am now going to go over the training schedule, announced Itachi, taking over for Shisui. You will still continue to train with your mother, as a strong body is also needed to utilize our dojutsu to its full potential. We will train you after your session with Kushina-sama is finished. Itachi could see a bit of a grimace on the young boy's face. I realize that you will be tired, but that is nothing more than a petty excuse. If you truly wish to be strong, then you will dig deep and push through it, and flourish because of it, finished Itachi. The weasel mask-wearing teen could see the fire in Naruto's eyes after his little speech, and knew his friend would do his best. You can count on me, exclaimed Naruto. Very good, we begin tomorrow. 1 year later. It's been a full year since Naruto had activated his bloodline, and he could say with a straight face that he was happy at the moment. His training with his mother had also taught him yet another skill which all ninjas should be adept at. Flashback. Naruto stood stock in his backyard while currently awaiting instruction from his mother. Naruto. She started. I'm very proud of you, to not only have mastered what I, and others have taught you, but to not once ever complain. Good work. She said as she gave him a big hug. Hee. He chuckled. Thanks, Ka-chan. He said, returning the hug. She smiled at him. You're welcome. Now we will move on to the next segment of your training, sabotage. Sabotage, said Naruto, trying the word out. There will be times when you will need to destroy something instead of fighting, she explained. However, it does not just involve destruction. It also entails obstruction, disruption, and subversion. What is subversion? He asked as he knew what the other two were. Good question. She told him. Subversion refers to an attempt to transform the social order, and its structures of power, authority, and hierarchy. She lectured, but saw his confused expression. It means changing the status quo. Ah. He said as he thought of something. Is that why you trained me in stealth and infiltration first? He asked as it made sense to teach him how to sneak in to destroy things. She nodded her head. Correct. Everything I or others have taught you to this point will be used in conjunction with each other or in some cases, separately. I see. He said. Other than sabotage, what else will I be learning? A new chakra control exercise for starters. Which is, motioning his arms telling her to continue. Water walking. He nodded his head as he had already mastered tree walking the year prior when he had been introduced to it. Plus, she continued, I want you to get better with your writing, which is why you're going to be doing some calligraphy training. Calligraphy. He made a face. Why that? It's for something I have planned in the future. Was all she said. Oh. He said, a bit disappointed she didn't elaborate. Let's get started on this new training then. While his training with his mother had been going great, it was his other training with the 2 teen Uchihas that had him giddy. He had finally managed to progress his dojutsu to its next stage while also discovering the ability of his eyes. Flashback. Naruto. Spoke Shisui. Yes. We've been training you in your dojutsu for the past year, and while you have progressed physically, your eyes have not, he stated. So I've noticed. Deadpanned Naruto. Which is why the both of us, Itachi and myself, have decided to up your progression rate, he chirped happily. And just how do you two plan on doing that? Naruto asked suspiciously. Simple. Avoid the shiny pointy objects that we are about to hurl at you. Shisui said nonchalantly. Huh, was Naruto's brilliant retort. Dodge, shouted Shisui, as he and Itachi threw shuriken and kunai. And so began the dodging game of death. However, there was something both Anbu members had failed to mention to their student. Most if not all of the shuriken and kunai were blunt. They did this to keep the threat of injury a real possibility. Naruto had begun to slow down somewhat, and this was noticeable by the few tears on his clothes. He had actually been tagged a few times that resulted in scratches, but he believed it to be a dull one in the bunch and would not chance it on the rest being similar. Both of the elder Uchiha were running quite low on their practice tools, but then Itachi had an idea that he wanted to try before they stopped the exercise. He weaved his hand seals, ram, rat, bird, boar, tiger, shuriken kage bunshin no jutsu. He threw his last shuriken, and watched it travel a few feet before multiplying into 100 more. What happened next completely took both Uchiha by surprise. Naruto had dodged the oncoming hail of shuriken, which they knew he would, or they would have saved him, but it was how he had done it. He had moved fast, far much faster than either of them had ever seen him move. They decided to halt the training session, and wanted to know how he had done it. Just as they approached him, and were about to question him, they stopped. Both noticed the change in Naruto's eyes. They had progressed one step further. Congratulations Naruto, said Shisui. Your eyes have moved one step closer to fully maturing, and as a reward for doing so, I'm going to teach you a new technique. Really? Said Naruto, who couldn't keep the excitement out of his voice. Thanks Dragon, thanks Weasel, for helping me get one step closer. Naruto thanked them while bowing to them. Itachi simply nodded his head, and was honestly a bit surprised to see Naruto bowing to him. He chose this moment to ask what had been on his mind. You're welcome, and do you mind if I ask you a question? Naruto titled his head forward a fraction, telling him it was okay. How did you move so fast? Did you apply chakra to your legs? Were his questions. No to your second question, answered Naruto and continued. I simply saw you throwing the shuriken while watching it multiply, and I just moved out of the way, he explained. I see. Was Itachi's reply, still trying to figure out how he did it. His own eyes lingered on Naruto's, and decided to try something. Do you mind if I throw these at you? Asked Itachi while holding a few shuriken. I just want to see how well your eyes can track them, he added quickly. Naruto simply raised an eyebrow at the odd request, but accepted. Okay, he said as he got into position. Itachi's fingers had a firm grasp on each individual shuriken. His body tensed a bit as he got into his own throwing stance. He released the first set that were in his right hand, but immediately noticed that Naruto had moved to the opposite side. He moved a second before I even threw them. Itachi muttered in a bit of disbelief. Naruto's movements, along with Itachi's throwing motion, were near instantaneous, and while most would assume that the blonde had just moved faster, Itachi saw differently. He readied his other hand, but just before they left his fingertips, Naruto had already moved to the safest possible location, completely avoiding his attack. There it is again, Itachi thought in frustration. He knew for a fact that his blonde friend was not moving faster than he showed, his own eyes showed him that. Then what is it? It was almost like he knows where I'm going to throw them before I do. That was when it hit him. Precognition, whispered Itachi, but loud enough for the other two to hear. Precognition, repeated the other two, wondering what he was talking about. That is the special ability your eyes have, stated Itachi, and even he couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his own mouth, as he couldn't fathom such an ability. Oh, realized Naruto. You mean how like either of yours allow you to cast stronger illusions or hypnotism? Correct, replied Itachi, still miffed about his friend giving away such information. Cool, indeed. Not even a fully matured Sharingan can predict things as fast or as far ahead as yours can. It is a truly frightening ability, praised Itachi. Sounds like a super useful ability, said Naruto, who couldn't help but smirk at this. This is true, replied Shisui. But remember not to let this go to your head, this is only a tool to help you, he said, reminding the blonde about their earlier conversation. Itachi nodded his head, hoping to add extra emphasis on what they were telling him. Even if these words did not get across to him, his next few certainly would. While I admit it is a very useful ability, I can already see fatal flaws in it as well. For one, began Itachi, if you fight a high-class ninja and move before they do anything, then you are just telegraphing yourself, and they will act accordingly. The next thing I noticed, he continued, while being able to predict a person's movement by body language, what about ninjutsu? Or genjutsu? He asked. How will you react if your enemy realizes all they need to do is sub-vocalize their attacks in order to harm you? He asked as he broke down the ability on his first glance. That's the Uchiha clan's prodigy for you, muttered Shisui, as he was nowhere near as astute as his friend was. Oh, said Naruto, completely dejected now. I guess you're right about that. Listen, sighed Itachi. Everyone in this world of ours has their own strengths, and their own weaknesses. It is up to the individual, however, to realize this, and do something about it. No technique is without its own weakness. He finished. Even yours? Asked Naruto while looking his friend in the eyes. Even mine. He did not hesitate when he answered. Which is why I train to compensate for it, same thing for Dragon. He explained, trying to give his friend some closure. He is right, you know, agreed Shisui. And that sure is one handy ability, Naruto. The predictive capabilities of your eyes far outclasses ours, complimented Shisui, hoping to cheer him up after the brutal explanation from Itachi. Itachi could see what his friend was up to, and decided to change the subject. Now, I believe we should explain the advantages of the next stage. Right, well, the second stage allows you to use the other abilities we've already stated to you, but it also allows you to copy techniques now, explained Shisui, knowing just how his nephew would react. Cool, replied Naruto, excited. Naruto, said Itachi, now that your dojutsu allows you to copy any technique, barring bloodline techniques, you can copy anything from generic techniques to an original, he explained. However, he continued, I suggest not copying original techniques from your comrades. You can, but I guarantee you they will view you differently once you do, and not in a good way. Naruto understood what his friend was telling him. He had no qualms about stealing original techniques from his enemies, who were probably trying to kill him. He also understood that last part as well. Thank you for the advice, thanked Naruto, before he remembered something. Oh, how about that technique? He said, salivating at learning something new. He turned to Shisui. Oh yeah, muttered Shisui. This is the technique that made me famous before I joined up, bragged Shisui. Naruto perked up at this, and grew more excited. He didn't know his uncle was famous. Outside of these walls, Enemy shinobi tremble when they hear this name while the kunoichi have to hold themselves back from having their way with me. They know me as Shunshin no Shisui, stated Shisui proudly, completely oblivious that he just named himself while in Anbu gear. Itachi merely let loose a sigh from his lips, and shook his head at his friend, and wondered just how his friend had even been accepted into the Anbu ranks. Whatever, muttered Itachi uncharacteristically. Naruto already knows who we are. I'm going to teach you the Shunshin no Jutsu. And learn it it had taken him a short while to master it, but he had done it. He did not copy it with his eyes as he wished to learn this one the old-fashioned way. It was also to show his friends that he was taking their words seriously. Right now, he was currently taking a break from his training, and was currently on his way to train his brain, at the library. He enjoyed reading, but what really grabbed and pulled him in was one subject in particular, history. Or more specifically, certain individuals in history. There were certainly many names throughout history that were respected, but were feared just as much. Some such as Senju Tobarama, Uchiha Izuna, Senju Toka, Mu the Nadaime Tsuchikage, and Z the Sandaime Raikage, just to name a few. However, while those people made their own contributions to the world he now currently lives in today, it was two other individuals that had started it all, and with their power saw it accomplished. He was talking about two legendary figures, the Uchiha Madara, and the Shinobi no Kami, Senju Hashirama. If there was one word he could use to describe himself when regarding these two, it would be enamored. He was enamored with both men, and their prowess in battle. Granted, there wasn't much information regarding the Uchiha, but anytime Hashirama's name was brought up, the Uchiha's name was not far behind. He also read anything he could on specific battles or wars that have long since passed. It was always a good idea to learn from history so as to not repeat it. It not only helped in learning the tactics from his own village, but from other villages as well. However, he was trying to learn a bit more on a certain subject that all of his teachers have either forgotten or just won't teach him, assassination. He figured that if he was going to be one of the best, then he needed to be knowledgeable in all fields of shinobi life. From what he remembered, there were many books, some harder to get than others, that held information regarding what he had just been thinking about. He was going to be at the library for a very long time today. 3 years later. 3 years had come and gone for one Uzumaki Naruto, and he had grown well. He was a healthy 10-year-old boy that stood at 4 feet 3 inches, and weighed 70 pounds. He had let his hair grow out to the point that he almost resembled his father, and the only reason people didn't see it was because he had no real interaction with the people. The only real difference that separated him from his father were the blood-red tips, that were bordering black, that he had received from his mother. And speaking of his mother, he was currently following her as she was leading him over to one of her friend's house. Apparently, she wanted him to make friends with people his age, and it was because of that they had taken a break from training. He still remembered when she had asked him. Flashback. Hey Naruto, hollered Kushina. He replied, not looking up from what he was doing. Listen up, I'm going over to a friend's house. She has 2 kids that I think are your age, do you want to go and meet them? He breathed in through his nose and exhaled through his mouth. No. Kushina growled a bit at his response. Well, too damn bad, cause you're going or I will beat your unconscious, and drag you there myself, Tte. Fine. He sighed, resigned to his fate. Flashback end. That had been a few hours prior to their current situation. He looked around, but he didn't really recognize the area they were in, and concluded that they were still a ways away. He thought back to the memorable events that had transpired over the past 3 years, and how his training with his 2 other friends had been completed. Flashback. Naruto. Age 8. Congratulations Naruto. Congratulated Itachi. You now have a fully matured Sharingan. Naruto simply nodded his head, and tried to re-catch his breath from the training session he just had, with 2 opponents. It had been both Shisui's and Itachi's idea to help awaken the last stage faster by putting him in a simulated battle. Naruto's eyes had responded to his turmoil, and they had evolved to help deal with the situation. Thanks, Weasel. Dragon. He thanked them in between breaths. You're welcome. Both said. What am I going to be learning next? Here, Itachi said, handing him a piece of paper. Channel some chakra into that, and we will go from there. Naruto had never taken his eyes off of the tiny piece of paper, as he knew what they were going to teach him now, nature manipulation. To think that you could learn so much from such a small piece of paper, smirked Naruto at the thought of it. He did as he was told, and applied a small amount of his chakra. He was quite happy with what he saw. The paper had a large tear right down the middle, signifying a strong affinity towards futon. What happened next was just as simultaneous as the first reaction. The paper itself ignited, and burned to ash. Impressive. Complimented Shisui. Not many can claim to have two equally strong nature affinities at such a young age. Hee. Chuckled Naruto. Thanks. I must agree with Dragon as well. Spoke Itachi. However, since neither of us have a wind affinity, we will focus on training your fire affinity. Right. Let's get started then. Said Naruto, really wanting to learn. Hummed Itachi in thought. What's wrong, Weasel? Asked Shisui as he saw his friend thinking. I believe that with the amount of chakra he has, and the fact that he has been doing chakra control since he was very little, it should allow him to use our clan's favorite technique. That's actually not a bad idea, said Shisui. Sounds like something I would have said, he muttered to himself. What was that? Itachi asked. Nothing. The Uchiha prodigy nodded his head. Then we are in agreement then? He asked Shisui, who gave him a nod. Very well then. Naruto called Itachi. Yes. I want you to watch me carefully, Itachi said as he ran through his hand seals. Naruto saw this and quickly activated his Sharingan. Horse, snake, ram, boar, monkey, horse, tiger, Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu, fire release, great fireball technique. Naruto watched in fascination as his friend had breathed air into his lungs, and then exhaled his breath with a giant fireball. It was massive in size, bigger than some of the trees in the area, and it completely burned everything in its path. Itachi cut the chakra flow, and stood tall. He gazed at Naruto, who was still looking at his fireball as it continued to travel and then dissipate. Naruto spoke Itachi, grabbing the blonde's attention. Did you see what I did? I did. Explain. Well, I saw you gathering fire chakra at the base of your stomach. Then I saw you apply regular chakra into your throat so as to not burn yourself, then you inhaled some air, and released your attack, explained Naruto. Correct. But why did I need to breathe in air for? He questioned. The air fueled the fire in your mouth, which made your attack bigger, and stronger. Correct again. Praised Itachi. This conversation aside, we need to discuss something very important with you, he said in a serious voice. Naruto caught the tone. And that is, Itachi did not want to say this, but he had no choice. I'm afraid we will not be able to continue our training sessions with you. What? Why? Naruto asked in confusion. Did somebody find out about this? He added. No, nobody found out about our group. Dragon, along with myself, are soon going to be assigned a rather long mission. Oh, responded Naruto, sadly looking down. How much longer do we have? Let's see here. You're about to turn 9 in 2 weeks, so I would wager we have about 10 months before we depart. Naruto grimaced. That's actually not a lot of time, he stated. No, it isn't. Time will fly by. Which is why in the remaining time we have, we will teach you to the best of our ability. Everything we will teach you is going to be split into months. Naruto raised an eyebrow. How are we going to work this? Simple. We will focus on one subject for 4 months, then another for 3 months, and we will repeat the process, he explained. The only question is, what you wish to focus on? I want to focus the first 4 months on ninjutsu, announced Naruto. Very well then, I want you to master this technique. When you do, we will move on to the next technique, said Itachi, steering the conversation back to his training. But what if I can't master it before we move on to the next part of my training? Asked a worried Naruto. Do not panic. Even if you don't master it, and we move on, we will leave some scrolls with you that contain techniques, reassured Itachi. At regular intervals, of course, he added. Okay, said Naruto, glad he would continue to learn, but sad he would be losing his 2 friends. End. That had been the first 4 months, and unfortunately for Naruto, he would have to now make do with scrolls. He had taken an entire month to master the first technique, and had mastered 2 more along the way. He hasn't been training with his mother as much, except for calligraphy. She had been a bit more busy doing her own things, and had left him to his own devices, hence the library. Speaking of the library, he had read most if not all books regarding the art of assassination. He could say without a doubt he knew how to assassinate a person, but actually putting it to practice was something else. The remaining 6 months had flown by as he spent it with Itachi and Shisui, as they taught him new things that would greatly benefit him in the years to come. Naruto. Age 9. Okay Naruto, it's just going to be me today, and the rest of the 3 months, stated Itachi in monotone voice. Where's Shisui? Shisui has some work to do that will take him a while to finish. Okay then, what will we be doing today? I'm going to teach you my area of expertise. Naruto's eyes lit up at hearing this news. You're going to teach me genjutsu. Correct. But first, he said. What can you tell me about genjutsu? Let's see here. Genjutsu is like ninjutsu, in that you need chakra, and sometimes hand seals, but instead of affecting the body, it affects the mind. It then causes a disruption in a person's senses, explained Naruto. Itachi nodded his head and agreed with his answer. Correct, but we who have the Sharingan are given an advantage over others. We can cast illusions with just our eyes alone. Of course we can also use hand seals, and I advise you to do that so as to keep your eyes a secret, but all it takes is a glance, and we have them, said Itachi, catching his breath after a lengthy explanation. Naruto took in all of the information he had just received. So what are you going to teach me? I'm going to teach you how to cast generic illusions with your eyes, and one of my favorite techniques. What's it called? Inquired Naruto. Megan. Kasagui no Jutsu, demonic illusion, shackling stakes technique. Naruto grimaced as that had been a long 3 months. A shiver coursed through his body at that memory, and he knew it was an illusion, but he would rather not go through that a second time. The blonde had also learned that like humans, dogs and other species of mammal can also be placed in an illusion. He moved past that memory, and thought to the last 3 months he had spent with his uncle. Naruto. Age 9 Kant. Yo Naruto. Greeted Shisui. Hello. As you know, I was not here the past 3 months as I had been assigned a mission, and now it has been Itachi. So it will be just the 2 of us, he said. And as I understand it he has been teaching you genjutsu. Yep. Then I'm going to teach you kenjutsu, he stated. Is there any particular style of blade you wish to use, or would you like to learn from the one I use? Offered Shisui. What type do you use? In my line of work, I use a ninjutsu, answered Shisui. Naruto was thinking of all of the blades he had read about. I'd like to use a kodachi. A kodachi, huh? A defensive blade. How good is your taijutsu then? Subpar, as I haven't really focused on it during my time training. Naruto answered truthfully. I see, then perhaps using 2 kodachi will solve your taijutsu problem, and I do believe I know of a style suited for dual kodachi. Well, he continued, for now we will just focus on you getting used to handling one, and then we will incorporate the second one. Right. And so began the kenjutsu training. Of course, all good things must come to an end, and he had spent his remaining time on his own trying to master what they had left him. He had received multiple scrolls with detailed writings on numerous fire techniques, genjutsu, and his new kenjutsu style. He had mastered a few more ninjutsu along with some genjutsu. However, his kenjutsu was the one that was taking him the longest. And before he knew it, he had already hit his 10th birthday. Not much had happened after that as the months went by. His mother was worried since he didn't socialize much with kids his own age, as there were none at his party. Mostly nothing but adults. It was the reason why he and his mother were currently on their way to her friend's house. Some part of him was hoping they were going to see his grandfather, Uchiha Kagami. He knew why he wasn't allowed to see him as he would need to go to the compound, and that would just raise questions. It still didn't mean he couldn't hope for it. His musings were cut short as he noticed his mother come to a stop. He did as well, and began to look around the area. Noting special. He commented looking around. It was then when he noticed something, 2 red markings. There were 2 red markings in front of a compound wall similar to that of the Uzumaki compound. He recognized the markings immediately from the various books he's read. The Inuzuka clan, huh? His thoughts were cut short as the gates attached to the wall had begun to open, and it revealed a person there waiting for them. A woman. A woman indeed. She was rather tall in his opinion, but then again most people are when you're only 10 years old. As he kept staring at her, there was one word that came to mind that could describe her perfectly. Feral. The woman in front of him had long, spiky, untamed brown hair, vertical slit-like pupils along with elongated nails, and canine teeth. She was proudly wearing her clan markings over her cheeks, and over her eyes. Naruto continued to stare at her, oblivious of his open leering. His eyes roamed all over her body, and he could tell she trained, if her well-toned legs and rear end was anything to go by. He nodded to himself in a silent approval. His eyes had begun to travel upwards, but stopped and lingered on her. Not as big as Ka-chan's, but they're still decent, he analyzed as he recalled what he had read in books detailing human anatomy. Like what you see, pup? Teased a feminine voice. His eyes widened marginally, and that's when he realized what he had been doing. He had been caught staring. I think I'm just a tad bit too old for you, repeated the same voice. I guess mother was right. This is what happens when I don't have much interaction with others. Naruto was inwardly chastising himself for his mistake. Hee, sorry about that, Sum-chan, apologized Kushina as the situation was just as awkward for her. Don't worry about it, Kushina-chan, he was just admiring a mature woman's body, waved off the now named Sum. I apologize if I have offended you, Sum-sama. This time it was Naruto who apologized while showing her respect. Such a well-mannered child, wish mine was like that. Sum muttered the last part. No apology needed, and dropped the sama honorific. Just call me Sum, or if you really want to, Sum-chan. She laughed at seeing his flustered face. Naruto had gone beet red from what she had just asked of him. What a pure boy, you don't see much of that these days, said Sum, trying to get a read on him. I guess I should properly introduce myself. My name is Inuzuka Sum, clan leader of the Inuzuka clan, and this is my partner Kuromaru. Nice to meet you. She introduced herself with a greeting. Naruto froze when he heard her full title. Oh crap, I was just caught checking out the clan head, he grimaced. Sum just had to hold her laugh in as she saw the young blonde grimace, she waved it off. Like I already said, don't worry about it, she trailed off. Uzumaki Naruto. He introduced himself. Well, don't worry about it, Naruto-kun. Now, shall we head inside? Gestured Sum. Inuzuka compound. As Sum led them through the compound, Naruto couldn't help but look around. It was decent to midsize that could probably house up to a various amount of members, but then again he didn't know the exact numbers of this clan. It was a rather practical setting in his opinion. The structures around the compound were built to accommodate if necessary, but were able to withstand an attack if need be. He didn't even have to focus his senses to hear the air filled with barking and loud shouts. Another detail he noticed was the lack of plant life, or ponds, but chalked it up to the numerous amounts of dogs running around, and he knew what dogs would do to plants and ponds. After the mini tour had been completed, the clan leader had taken them to her personal home, where he was introduced to her children. Hi, chirped the boy, I'm Inuzuka Kiba, nice to meet you. He stuck out his hand in greeting. A bit too loud for my tastes, was the first impression Naruto had of Kiba. Likewise, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, who reached out and shook the outstretched hand. Arf, whoops, sorry about that, apologized Kiba. This little guy up here is my partner, say hi Akamaru. Arf, hello, greeted Naruto with a slightly raised eyebrow, but shrugged his shoulders. Well, him being loud aside, both of them seem nice enough, he believed, and then shifted his attention to the Sum's other child. If he had to take a wild guess, he would wager she was about 3 to 5 years older than him. He was silently studying her, but he was unaware she was doing the exact same to him. Not bad, definitely one to look out for in the future. A smirk had made its way to her face. Uzumaki Naruto. Inuzuka Hana. They both gave each other a nod. Naruto took note that while Hana was an Inuzuka, she looked the complete opposite from the rest of her clan. The only thing in common she had with the rest were the clan markings on her cheeks. She didn't have elongated canine teeth or nails, nor did she have wild untamed hair. She was the prototype of what the rest of her clan would look like if they had a softer appearance. She inherited long brown hair, which was in a ponytail, along with large black eyes. Just stunning were the thoughts of one blonde Uzumaki as he was yet again checking out another woman of the Inuzuka clan. Good choice of clothing as well, he commented as she had on a jacket along with form-fitting shorts that just extenuated her curves. Perhaps high C cup, guessed Naruto as he was staring at her unzipped jacket which just happened to show off a generous amount of cleavage. Should I be expecting grand pups sometime soon, Naruto-kun? Teased Sum as she saw how both her daughter and Naruto were sizing up one another. Wah, a flabbergasted Naruto said. Ha 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 ha, I'm just kidding, laughed the clan leader. Both Naruto and Hana blushed at just what was insinuated. I'm going to go and take a shower, announced Hana. Oh, do you want someone to go and take a peek? Is that why you announced it to the world? Hana-chan, stated Sum with a wink at her daughter. Hana turned even redder, and had said nothing while proceeding to the restroom. Well, I wouldn't mind if he did take a peek. I could show him what he would be in store for. She giggled to herself while sauntering off, knowing Naruto's eyes were still trained on her backside. Kushina just stood in the room mouth agape some moments while getting angry in others, but sighed as she knew her friend was just messing around. Well, I'll leave Naruto in your care, Sum-chan. Naruto, whose eyes were still on Hana's backside, widened when he heard this, and snapped his head in his mother's direction. Where are you going, Ka-chan? I'm only going to be gone for a little while as I have some business with the Hokage, she explained while hugging him. I'll be back to pick you up after I'm finished, and do try to make a friend, son. She whispered the last part. Fine. He sighed. Let's head outside, Kiba. Naruto called out. Coming. Hokage Tower. We see one Uzumaki Kushina standing before the Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. What did you wish to discuss this evening, Kushina? Sarutobi breathed out a puff of smoke from his pipe. I plan on taking Naruto to Uzushio. The third began to cough a bit, and was honestly surprised at what he had just heard. Whatever he was thinking she would say, that was not it. What for, if I may ask? His tone calm, but his mind working a mile a minute. Take it easy, Hiruzen. I just want to teach my son his heritage, along with Fuinjutsu. He narrowed his eyes a bit. And you can't teach him that here, inside of the village? He asked. Kushina knew the man cared about her and Naruto, and just wanted to keep them safe. No doubt them leaving the village would put them in danger, especially considering they were the last two Uzumakis, and both were very important to the village, her right now, and Naruto when a few years older. I can't teach him here for a few reasons. The first being that there are things in Uzu, mainly scrolls, that would greatly help his progress. I have already begun his training on his calligraphy, so I need what are in those ruins, she answered sadly when she mentioned ruins in her former village in the same sentence. I see. Sighed Hiruzen while still looking at the red head. And just how long will this trip of yours take? She inhaled a breath. A year. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? He said, cleaning out his ear. A year. What in the name of Kami is going to need you to be out of the village for a year? That ties into the second reason. And that is, you know just how dangerous Fuinjutsu is, right? It was rhetorical as she knew he knew how dangerous. One small mistake can prove disastrous, and with a village full of people, well, I'll let your imagination handle that. Hiruzen couldn't help but shudder at that prospect, and he knew from personal experience on just how destructive seals could be. Mito-sama proved that. It seems you have your mind set on this, he said. Then I will approve. Kushina smiled. On the condition that two of my Anbu travel with you, and know this is non-negotiable, he firmly told her. Fine. She muttered. Then I want Dragon and Weasel. She had known both boys were in the Anbu, and had been training her son secretly. She wasn't a former member herself for no reason, Plus she has a high-ranking friend in there. Hiruzen was a bit surprised at who she wanted, but schooled his features. I'm sorry, but those two are on a long-term mission at the moment, he told her while avoiding her eyes. Kushina narrowed her own in suspicion as she saw him avoiding looking directly at her. Then who? Let me handle that. I will send them after they have been briefed on their mission, he told her while finally bringing his eyes to hers. Fine. She sighed. Just let them know that we will be leaving in a week. Inuzuka compound. It had been a little over a half an hour since his mother had left him with the Inuzuka family, and he was not enjoying himself. Damn it, Kiba. An annoyed Naruto shouted. Stay still. No way. Your game is slow and boring. I want to move around. Naruto took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. I need to calm myself down. Kiba. Said boy turned his head as he was called. What can you tell me about your sister? Asked Naruto. Well, she's very nice, and she's very close to graduating from the ninja academy, he stated. She also said she wants to be a medic nin, but she also wants to be a veterinarian, he finished. A medic and a vet? Those are very challenging fields. Naruto thought as his opinion on Hana was rising. So what are we going to do now? Asked Kiba as he was getting slightly impatient. How about we play some shogi? No way, that is boring. Whatever. Sighed Naruto. Where is your restroom? I need to use it. Go back into the house through the kitchen, and make a left. It's going to be the first door on your right. Kiba said giving directions. Oh, and try not to get any on the floor. Mom hates that. I don't know why you're telling me this. I'm not you. He told him and found the room easily enough as he stood in front of the door. However, the door was left ajar. Nobody should be in here. Confusion written on Naruto's face. Hana should be out by now, right? Lime. He poked his head inside of the room a tiny bit, and turned on his dojutsu as the steam was blocking his normal vision, and he froze. His heart began to beat much faster as his pulse quickened, as there before his very eyes was the silhouette of a woman who was as bare as the day she was born. He was starting to hyperventilate. Oh crap, I really should leave, but my body isn't responding. His breathing getting heavier and heavier as the steam slowly started to dissipate. He silently drank in the form of Inuzuka Hana, and the same word came back to him when he first saw her. Just stunning. He had already studied her body when he had arrived, and that was fully clothed, but this was something else entirely. I just hope she doesn't know I'm here, he prayed. He continued to watch as she showered while his eyes caught every drop of water that traveled in between her perky. His body shivered a bit as her jiggled slightly due to her moving her arms which were busy washing her head. Her were starting to erect due to the cool air that traveled through the open door. His eyes roamed over every part of her body from her developing stomach to her growing backside. With his eyes still active he could see a small amount of muscle beginning to form on her small frame, but it fit her very well. Beautiful. Marveled Naruto as reading about a female's body was by far a different experience than having a real one in front of you. I really should leave. He kept telling himself this, and was about to act on it until he saw something that rooted him to his current spot. Hana was bending over with her face and elbows on the wall, and he could see everything. His mouth was left agape, and he could not utter a single word. Nothing could be said, he had the perfect view. The blonde could see it all, vagina, snippets of pubic hair, and her anus. Everything was just staring at him in the face. Breathing functions ceased at this moment. Luckily his brain was still functioning. I really need to get out of here. But something stopped him yet again. A moan escaped the woman's lips. He refocused his eyes back on her, and felt something dripping from his nose. Heat was beginning to rise not only in the room but in him as well as he was witnessing something that most people usually do in private. Right before his eyes, Inuzuka Hana was playing with her vagina furiously, rubbing it while adding saliva from her mouth. She moaned again as she inserted 2 fingers. She went slowly at first, but then she began to thrust them back and forth with such vigor. She continued, while he watched, for about another few minutes before taking them out, and putting her fingers in her mouth, sucking the juice she had produced from her own body. It was a very arousing scene, but she wasn't done yet. She isn't done yet. I can't believe she is still aroused after all of that. He looked on incredulously. The blonde watched as she suddenly pulled something from the bottom of her shower. What the hell is that? It looks like a stick. She was applying her saliva to this as well, but this time it was engulfed in her mouth. She sucked on it for a few seconds for good measure, and he could hear the lewd sounds she was making, if her loud slurping was any indication. She took it out and applied some saliva to her fingers that went directly to her anus, making it slicker. It didn't take a genius to figure this out, and put two and two together. No way. Is she really going to? Ah! She let out a howl of a sensual roar as she penetrated herself from behind right into her anus. The blonde noticed that her knees were knocking against each other from the sheer pleasure that was coursing through her body. She slowly began to make her descent to the shower floor and was on her hands and knees. She began thrusting once more, only much faster, and a lot deeper. From what he could make out, from his angle, she was starting to drool from the excessive amounts of pleasure. She couldn't control herself at the moment. This was something that was going to be ingrained into his memory, and it would stay with him for the rest of his life. I feel like such a creeper though, he told himself as he was still watching her from the door. However unknown to him, Hana was indeed aware of his presence. She wasn't part of the Inuzuka clan for nothing, she smelled him as soon as the door creaked a bit. To her age held no precedence in who she wished to have relations with. They were ninja or soon going to be, and they could both die tomorrow for all they know. Life with no regrets. It was because of that saying that she decided to take the initiative with him by giving him a little show she was sure he would remember. It was also an indicator of what they could do together. It was enough for now though, and she wouldn't push it farther than this, for now. I'll catch him later, maybe when he turns 12 or 13. She knew she was contradicting herself a bit, but she wanted him to develop a bit more first before they indulged themselves. She got back up to dry herself as she had already climaxed, and she had already known he was gone. It was true, he had vanished as soon as she had finished thrusting into herself. He had bolted out of the house so fast he was nothing but a yellow flash. However, there was one thing that had come to his mind after he had watched all of that. She really likes it up the. It was true as she screamed the loudest when she was penetrated in her. He blushed thinking about it again. Kushina arrived to pick up her child, but as soon as she did she saw him running out of the house. She was glad to see that her, and others, training of her son has indeed paid off if the way he was moving was anything to go by. Her brows furrowed together, meaning she was confused about something. Why was her son running out of the house for? She couldn't ponder on these things anymore as he finally made his way over to her after shouting his goodbyes to Kiba and Sum, and grabbed her hand, pulling her away. They were both quite a distance away already. Naruto, Naruto, she yelled. Stop already. The words had registered in his head, but his body did not respond until they had reached all the way to the Uzumaki compound. Naruto stopped suddenly, and caught his breath. Sorry. About that. Ka-chan. What's wrong? Why did you suddenly bolt out of the house like that? She asked in worry. He chose not to answer her question, and instead began to turn red. Why are you turning red for? Are you sick or something? Kushina placed her forehead atop his own, feeling his temperature. No, he stammered. Anyways, why did you go to the Hokage Tower for? He asked, changing the subject. She was grinning from ear to ear when she heard his question, and couldn't wait to surprise him. I just got the okay for the both of us to travel. Travel? To where? To Uzushiogakure, the ancestral home of the Uzumaki clan. What? Really? He couldn't keep the excitement from his voice. Really? Confirmed his mother. Wow, what are we going to do there? I'm going to continue your training there. More specifically in your Fuinjutsu. Why did you think I had you train your calligraphy? It was all for this coming trip. How long are we going to be there for? The trip itself will only take a few hours to a day at most, depending on the speed we travel at, but we will be staying there for about a year, she explained. When do we leave? He asked, leaning in for the answer. In a week. Get your things ready. A week later. Where are they at? He thought in frustration. I wanted to say goodbye to them before I left. Naruto was a bit irritated since it was very early in the morning, and he wanted to say farewell to both Itachi and Shisui. Hello Naruto-kun. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. He turned around. Hello Weasel. Why isn't Dragon with you? Quote. Flashback. Quote. Itachi wheezed out a voice. Itachi whirled around, pulled out a kunai ready to plunge it into whoever had snuck up behind him. He halted in his attempt as it was someone he was familiar with, Shisui. Shisui, what happened to you? The man looked like he had just been in a battle for his life. The plan, the one we've been trying for months, it didn't work, he coughed. The coup d'état is still proceeding forward, and I bring more bad news, his tone grave. What else? Questioned Itachi. Shisui knew just how bad the situation was, and was sure Itachi would know as well with the single word he muttered. Danzo. Itachi's jaw tightened. What has that man done now? Well, you can thank him for my current appearance as he tried to steal my eyes, he admitted. Luckily I was able to evade his drones, they don't call me Shunshin no Shisui for nothing, he chuckled. Enough with the jokes Shisui. Itachi was very irritated right now. What has Danzo done now? Shisui cut the aloof attitude. Besides trying to take my eyes, he's managed to take 2 of our clansmen's eyes. However, his voice grim. They weren't just any eyes, he took 2 pairs of Mangekyo eyes. He dropped the information bomb. What? How is that possible? There were only 2 other people who had activated them, and they went missing. Finished Shisui. No, they didn't go missing, they were killed. He has Uchiha Naka and Uchiha Naori's eyes. And you know just how strong those 2 eyes were, especially Naori's. Itachi wore a grimace when he thought of that woman. She was indeed powerful, and coupled with her Mangekyo just made her even stronger. Itachi had lied to Naruto when he said he had never seen an ability in a Sharingan like his. Naori had the same ability. Only in his opinion, Naruto's was stronger. At its current level, and would only get stronger if his eyes ever evolved to the next stage. This is bad Shisui, if he were to ever get his hands on your eyes, he trailed off. I know, which is why I'm entrusting them to you. I want you to give them to Naruto, it will be my last gift to him as his friend, teacher, and family member, instructed Shisui. Itachi hesitated for a moment. Very well, I shall see that he receives these. Thank you Itachi. Thanked Shisui as he plucked out his 2 eyes without so much as eliciting a sound of pain, and moved over to the Naka River. They both exchanged a few words with each other, one asking the other to protect their home and family, while the other was thanking them for their sacrifice, and that was all that was said. The deed was done, and Uchiha Shisui had erased his existence. Itachi let his emotional mask fall, and began to cry at the loss of a friend, and a man he would gladly call brother. He would honor the last wish of his brother, and left the vicinity. In his haste to wipe away his tears before getting to the village, he wiped away, not a tear of water, but a tear of blood. He had awakened his own Mangekyo Sharingan. Cell, Weasel, shouted Naruto. Pardon. Oh, I apologize for zoning out Naruto-kun. What did you ask me? Naruto raised an eyebrow. Itachi never zones out. He thought in suspicion. I asked you where Dragon was at. Oh, he is currently on a mission, out of the village. Itachi hated doing this, lying to a friend. Oh, well tell him when you see him that I said goodbye, and I'll be back soon. I can do that, Itachi replied solemnly. I'm so sorry about this Naruto. Itachi subtly activated his dojutsu while Naruto's head was turned, and would put a mild sleep genjutsu on him. Genjutsu. Suman Unagasu, illusion technique, sleep induction. Itachi's and Naruto's eyes briefly met for a second and he knew he had him. He immediately got to work as he knew Naruto would soon realize something was different. He summoned a crow that had both of Shisui's eyes, and it dive-bombed straight into Naruto's mouth, and it would wait there. I placed a seal on those eyes so that they would emerge if Naruto were ever to activate his own Mangekyo, or if he was in dire need of them, thought Itachi as the crow inside of Naruto knew of this as well. Gasp. Naruto blinked a bit, and checked his surroundings, his eyes narrowed. Did you put me in a genjutsu? I did, admitted Itachi. I wished to try something out on you for old time's sake, as a teacher and student, and because I wanted to see how well it would work on a user of the Sharingan. I also have a mission later on, and wished to use it then as well, he explained. Naruto's eyes never left Itachi's. Very well then, make sure you deliver my message. See ya later, Itachi. He said to the older teen, as he ran over to his mother who arrived a few seconds ago, after the illusion was done. I will make sure he gets it. Itachi told himself. Goodbye Naruto, until we meet again. And with that he was gone, ready to undertake his own mission. It was early in the morning, too early in fact as there was still some morning mist lingering around the path in front of them. The forest around them had only just begun to awaken from its own slumber as the birds were beginning to fly around chirping, and the insects were starting to buzz. The cool air was a nice refreshing feeling on their faces as the sun itself was only just starting to rise over the horizon. Very few people would be seen this early in the morning while moving at the speeds they were traveling at. Not bad. His speed had definitely improved, and is well above Genin level, perhaps low Chunin. Kushina was eyeing her son, and evaluating him as he was keeping up with her. Then again, I am only going at a certain pace. Her silent evaluation was cut short. Ka-chan, what can you tell me about Uzushio? Naruto wanted to know as much as he could about his ancestral home. Let's see here, Uzushiogakure was located on an island off the coast of Hai no Kuni. The clan itself was located in Uzu no Kuni, land of whirlpools. We were known for many things which made us just as feared, and respected as the Senju or Uchiha clans. Naruto was paying very close attention here. What were they? Kushina took a thinking pose for a few seconds before answering. Some of our clan were masters of Suidan ninjutsu that rivaled that of Senju Tobarama, she stated and smiled when she saw his look of disbelief. Others were masters of Kenjutsu, but there were two things that we were synonymous for. And those were our Fuinjutsu and longevity. She answered and could see his confusion. Longevity. He tilted his head, clearly confused with the concept of just why it was feared. Yep, it was one of the things known about us throughout the elemental nations, she chuckled at the next part. We even got the epithet, Choju no Sato, village of longevity, from our enemies. Wow, to think that their own enemies would give them such a title, they must have seen the Uzumakis as a huge threat. Is there anything else you can tell me? Most Uzumakis had some form of red hair while usually always having huge reservoirs of chakra, she explained. But that was commonplace amongst our people, the only other thing worth mentioning would be our bodies. Our bodies? Can you explain? Not much worth explaining really. Our bodies can survive most injuries that would usually kill others, and we are blessed with strong recuperative abilities. Those abilities allow us to recover from exhaustion, and mend most injuries within a short period of time. She listed off all of the things she knew about their clan's bodily functions. Naruto did not reply, instead choosing to soak in, and process all of the information that had just been fed to him. He was glad he was born into the Uzumaki clan. I guess I now know how I've been able to keep up with all of the training under my various teachers. A brief moment of silence had descended upon them as they continued their trek to the coast, inching ever closer to their destination. However, a random thought soon struck the blonde. Wait one damn minute. Just what is my last name then? He blanched at the prospect that eventually came to mind. Naruto Kagaya Uzumaki Uchiha Namikaze. He shuddered at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. Perhaps I should drop Namikaze as my father was only using that name because he didn't know his actual one. But then again, after an intense debate with himself, he finally came to a conclusion that he felt would not only work for himself, but in different situations. I will most likely always present myself as either Uzumaki or Kagaya. Konoha would ask too many questions should I use Uchiha, and Namikaze while praised inside of Konoha is despised out of it. These two names will only be used in special occasions until I see fit. He knew how dangerous the name Namikaze was after he found out who his father was. It was during his time in the library when he read all about the exploits of his father during the Third Shinobi World War, and how he alone made the biggest dent in Iwa's forces. Kushina kept her gaze on the road in front of her while out of the corner of her eye she could see her son coming to some decision. Shrugging her shoulders, and deciding not to pry, she put her full attention on the road ahead. They were close. Uzushiogakure. The blonde Uzumaki honestly had no idea what to expect when they arrived and he would finally lay his eyes on his clan's home. He did not expect to see what he actually came across. The once great home of the Uzumaki clan lay in complete ruins. It was worse than he expected. Even from his current position, he could not see one building standing. Welcome to Uzushiogakure, Kushina announced in mock grandeur. The duo had arrived not a few minutes ago, and were both standing outside of the village entrance. His mother explained to him how back in the day, their village had a very strong defensive barrier around the entirety of the village that made it difficult for enemies to enter or attack. It was obviously designed to hold back a certain amount of force, just not from multiple angles. I wonder if I can come up with something like this for our home back in Konoha. Most of the important things should still be secure. Our sealing techniques weren't feared for nothing. Kushina then proceeded to take the first step inside of the village while Naruto wasn't far behind. Ka-chan. He grabbed her attention. Why is the village even in a state like this? I already gave you the answer, try and think about it, she responded cryptically. She did. When? He replayed their conversation to that point. It was Fuinjutsu. Fuinjutsu. Correct. Many villages feared our prodigious skill in the art, and thus 3 of them banded together to destroy us during the Second World War. This is the fruit of their labors. She motioned to the destruction before them. Amazing. They were so feared that it took 3 major villages to completely destroy us. He was inwardly smirking as his admiration for his clan kept growing. Are we the only 2 remaining Uzumaki left? I'm not entirely sure. She sighed. I want to go out and find some, but only when the time is right. Naruto knew the real reason. She means me. A frown adorned his face. She can't go out and find them because of me. Don't worry, Ka-chan, when I'm stronger we can go and look together. He promised to her then and there that he would help see her goal accomplished. Well, let's head deeper inside, and set up the place that we will be calling home for the next year. They began to both scout out possible living areas, and this would take them the entire day. Right. Naruto followed behind his mother, keeping a lookout for any spots he thought might work for them. 6 months later. 6 months had passed by in the blink of an eye for the 2 residents of Uzu. It was now March, and Naruto himself had learned numerous amounts of things, and not just from his mother either. Flashback. Naruto let loose a sigh which he felt he had been doing for a majority of the time he had been working. The art of sealing was truly a very tiring process, especially when trying to master a seal he had been given 2 months ago. It was a basic storage seal, however his assignment was to condense the matrix formula on his arm. He was really starting to get fed up with this, and decided to try something else. He sent chakra to his eyes. Perhaps my eyes can show me something I may have missed. That was the general idea. Unfortunately his eyes could not help him in this particular instance. It's not working. He growled out, and slowly began to pull on his hair out of irritation. As he was pulling, his eyes briefly glanced over the surrounding flora around the canopy, and froze. There, a good couple of yards away from him, he could see 2 chakra signatures in the trees. It was at this moment he was glad he had learned how to place a genjutsu over his eyes. Thank you, Itachi. He muttered. While silently thanking his friend, he immediately cut the chakra flow from his eyes. I need to tell Ka-chan about this. He needed to inform his mother of this, but he needed to do so subtly without giving himself away. The blonde Uzumaki stood up from the ground, and dusted himself off while calmly walking his way back to his temporary home. A few seconds later he found his mother making some food for lunch, which he abruptly put a stop to when he pulled on her sleeve. Kushina looked down to see her son pulling on her sleeve, and let a smile grace her features. It was just like when he was growing up. She stopped smiling when she saw his face, it held distress. What's wrong, Sochi? Ka-chan. He whispered. There are 2 people in the trees, and they were watching me. Her entire body tensed for a second, ready to leap to her son's defense, but stopped. She released a calming breath, and realized that Naruto had spotted the 2 Anbu sent by the Hokage. She had been a bit miffed when neither showed themselves when her and Naruto had left Konoha to come to Uzu, but she couldn't really blame them, it's their job to remain in the shadows. Well, At least they're doing their jobs correctly. He must have spotted them with his dojutsu. She told herself as it was the only way he could have. She knew they had been there, but she had only felt them in flashes at times. They must be veterans. It was the only way they could remain so inconspicuous, they had experience. She tenderly took hold of her son's hand, and held a kunai in the other. You never know. Kushina and Naruto calmly walked back into his work area where she quietly asked her son to subtly direct her with his eyes to their location. He scanned the area, and blinked twice when he landed on one particular spot, and kept scanning. She had received the spot. I know there are 2 of you in the canopy, and I know who sent you. Come out, she said in an authoritative tone. There was a bit of hesitation, and an uneasiness began to creep into Kushina's mind as she gripped the kunai. Are these not the 2 the Hokage sent, or maybe they were killed trying to protect us already from certain threats? She needed to protect her son at all costs. After a few more seconds of an uneasy silence, the hesitation had ceased, and 2 figures dropped down before the mother and son. Each took a knee, and looked up to her. As soon as Kushina had seen their individual masks, she let out a breath of relief she had been holding in, and a cry of surprise. Inu. Neko. I didn't know the Hokage had sent the 2 of you. Hi Kushina-sama, answered Neko. We did not wish to reveal ourselves to you or your son, but we noticed the concealed weapon, and did not wish for there to be a misunderstanding if we did not reveal ourselves, she explained. What she said. Inu pointed at Neko. The red-headed Uzumaki nodded with a thoughtful expression on her face. Thank you for coming out from your hiding spot, and I know of your mission, but after the hesitation for a few seconds, well, I just couldn't take any chances with my son here. And you 2 don't have to address me as Kushina-sama. Just call me by my name. The 2 agents looked to each other for a second and then back to their charge. Inu shrugged his shoulders. Very well then. Kushina. Neko managed. Ka-chan. Naruto spoke, catching the adult's attention. Who are they? And how do you know them? Kushina took a knee and stood eye level with her son. Well, I had planned on telling you this when you were a bit older, but oh well. I actually used to be in the Anbu, but had to stop since I got pregnant with you. Naruto was stunned speechless. His mother used to be a part of a group that was considered the best of the best, who were just under the cages. Wow. Hee hee. She chuckled while scratching her head. She was glad she could still surprise him every now and then. And the reason I know these 2 specifically is because I used to be their squad leader, she explained, and then sent a quick glance towards Inu, who just stared at her. He shrugged his shoulders once more, and she nodded. Plus, I'm not the only one who knows one of them. No, the young Uzumaki was confused. He knew one of them personally. I know one of them. He tried to think of who. Can't be Itachi or Shisui, their chakra isn't the same. He mumbled to himself, but then it came to him. There was only one other person who had ever personally tutored him aside from his mother and the 2 Uchiha. Plus the hair should have been a dead giveaway. Kakashi ni-san, screamed the blonde, who at this point ran towards the older man, and gave him a hug. Yo Naruto, greeted the silver-haired man, reciprocating the hug. Are you here to teach me too? Naruto asked innocently, as only a child could. Well, Kakashi looked to the blonde's mother, who gave him the slightest of nods. In a sense. Cool. He responded before remembering that there was one more person, and turned to them. Who are you? I don't think I know who you are. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, nice to meet you. He bowed, showing the manners that he was taught. Kushina thanked whatever deity that Naruto had turned out more like Minato in the manners department, and not like her. If he had turned out like her, she would have no doubt been pulling out her hair, and would have been bald already. She decided to answer Naruto's question about the female agent. Due to certain protocols, she won't be giving out her real name, and you should continue calling Kakashi here by his codename as well. Naruto was about to ask a question regarding this, but she beat him to it. The only reason I told you about Kakashi is because you already knew him, and you would have figured it out. You're a smart boy after all, she praised while pinching his cheek. Naruto blushed at the sudden affection from his mother, and he could hear the snickering coming from the other 2, but chose to ignore it. He understood now. So what should I call you then? He asked the purple-haired woman. You can call me Neko. Nice to meet you, Neko-san. He re-greeted again. Likewise, Naruto. Kakashi chose this time to voice his question. So with you knowing I'm here, what would you like to learn from me? His voice held its usual laziness, but his body language suggested something else. Kakashi's own thoughts were drifting to a promise he made a long time ago. I can finally repay Minato-sensei. He was going to make sure his sensei's son was strong. I want to learn ninjutsu. Naruto responded to the offer with vigor. He already had time with his fire affinity under his belt, might as well see if Kakashi knew any wind techniques. The silver-haired Anbu nodded his head. Okay then, let's find out what your affinity is and go from there. Naruto was about to say he wanted to learn futon, but held his tongue. How was he going to explain how he already knew what affinities he had? Okay, what do I do? Here. Inu handed him a piece of paper. Just apply your chakra to that. Naruto already knew what to do, but feigned ignorance. He applied his chakra, and as expected he received both equally strong natures in fire and wind, which surprised the adults, but to his own surprise the paper began to wrinkle. Wah! Was his only response to this. Well, I must say I am impressed. To not only have two already strong affinities, but a third that is only slightly weaker, complimented Kakashi. As expected of Kushina and Minato-sensei's son, he told himself as it would seem he could teach Naruto some of his own lightning techniques. Thanks. He was still in shock. I must have developed a third affinity when I was busy training in my Fire 1, he told himself. So what would you like to learn? Fire, wind, or lightning? Naruto answered immediately as he knew what he wanted. Do you know any wind or lightning techniques? Kakashi simply nodded his head. I do know some techniques regarding those affinities, he admitted. We can start whenever you wish, he offered. Thank you, he replied. Would you like to learn anything from me? Asked Neko, speaking for the first time in a while. She would like to get some experience in training someone just as Kakashi was doing. This not only surprised Naruto, but Kushina and Kakashi as well. Can you do that? I mean, won't you get in trouble for that? I can understand Inu offering, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but why would you want to? Asked a confused Naruto. The other adults also wished to hear her answer. It's going to get boring not doing anything but watching Inu or your mother train you for a year. She deadpanned, not fully coming clean about her true reason. I see, hee. It was an awkward situation, but Naruto rolled with it. Well, if you want to help, that's good with me. What do you know if you don't mind me asking? She smirked behind her mask while polishing her nails even though they were gloved. I'd like to think I'm pretty good at kenjutsu. Really? Then you can be my sparring partner. I think I can handle that. Kushina clapped her hands, getting everyone's attention. Okay, now that that's settled and out of the way, let's go and eat lunch. Hi. Thanks to the help of the two Anbu now inhabiting the island, Naruto's skills had jumped by leaps and bounds. He learned as many wind and lightning techniques as he could from Kakashi while polishing the kenjutsu style Shisui gave him with Neko. He also kept practicing his fire affinity, but he kept that on the down low. His actual reason for coming to the village was coming along, albeit at a slower pace than his other skills. The storage seal was complete and he had already applied it to his arm, and the next thing he had made were explosive tags, which were much easier in his opinion. He was currently working on something that would allow him to access his shuriken or kunai faster. Plus he heard about gravity seals and felt those would be rather useful as well at some point. His mother would always tell him to take his time when it came to seals, which he will always abide by. However, he wanted to really get into the more advanced stuff, but his mother told him only after he reached a certain skill in what he already knows. He knew when he was defeated and just had nodded his head to her. 6 months was all the remaining time he had left, and from what his mother had told him a few days ago, they were going to start taking as many missions as they could. She told him most were going to be low in ranking so he could get his feet wet. Depending on how he handles himself, he could also be going on missions on his own in a few months. However, first things first. He needed new attire. I wonder where Ka-chan is. She said she would be back in no more than a couple of hours. He was waiting for his mother to return from a local weapons shop a few miles in a small settlement. I'm back, hollered a woman's voice. Naruto's head perked up, and went to greet his mother. Welcome back, Ka-chan. Kushina saw her son and grinned. Hey Naruto, check out what I bought. She presented him with all of her purchases. Some bags held clothes while others held weapons and miscellaneous items. Here, change into these. She shoved a few bags into his arms. Fine. He grumbled. It took him a few seconds to put everything on, but he finally finished and presented himself to his mother while the two Anbu were watching in the background. Naruto was now sporting a new pair of black combat boots, black Anbu pants that were taped down at the bottom of his ankles, with black tape. Up top he was wearing a mesh shirt that was gray in color, and could almost have passed as a regular shirt. He had a weapons pouch on his waist while another smaller one rested on his thigh. The ensemble was finished with a black cloak that had a hood attached to it with an obi sash tying everything together. He also had two metal arm guards strapped to his forearms with some gloves on his hands while his two kodachi were strapped vertically on his lower back. The only visible features on him were his mouth, nose, and two bangs of yellow hair that were beginning to grow out. He was about to ask about this, but his mother held up her hand silencing him. Here, take this. She handed him one last package. I bought this as well, and it will complete the outfit. It was a mask, but an extremely menacing looking type of mask. If he had to take a guess, he would say it resembled something between a cat and a fox. A hybrid. It had a signature look, it was smiling with its many teeth showing. It had small edges sticking out that represented the cheeks while its small but sharp ears were sticking out. It had slitted eye holes large enough for a person to see through, and some parts of it were outlined in black while above and below the eyes were two red markings. The only other noticeable feature it had was the two red markings on the forehead. All in all, it was a mask that would strike fear into those who see it. Nice. Naruto absolutely loved the mask, and placed it over his face. How do I look? Dangerous. The three adults chorused together. Thanks. He thanked them not only for the compliment, but he thanked his mother for the gear. So when is our mission? Later tonight. It's a very simple mission. Just observe the specified target, and report, she explained. That's it. The three veterans could hear the apprehension in his voice. It was his first mission after all, so it was understandable. That's it. She confirmed. If there is something else, then the mission assigner will contact us about it. Naruto took a deep breath, and nodded his head. Okay then, I will see you in a few hours. Later that night, the mission had gone smoothly and both Uzumaki were going at a steady pace back to Uzu. Not much in terms of action had taken place, and Naruto was a bit relieved about that. In the distance to his left he could see a yellow-reddish hue, and was curious as to what it was. He pointed it out to his mother and she narrowed her eyes, she motioned him to follow her. He nodded and was wondering just what was going on at this time of night. Perhaps an all-night festival. They arrived to see not the happy smiling faces of people who were celebrating a festival, but to horror-stricken ones. The people were being slaughtered by a mob of men who were armed with cheap-looking clothes and weapons. Bandits. These men held no remorse or hesitation when cutting down the men or children, nor were they hesitant in their looting. Naruto looked to his mother and he could see she was beyond angry. The streets were going to run red with blood tonight. These men were completely unaware of their impending doom as they just kept up their plundering to their heart's content. He froze when he heard what these idiots said next. We should take the women with us, said one man. I agree. They can provide us with some form of entertainment for a few hours, and then we can just sell them off to the highest bidder, said another who laughed. Oh man, these guys are dead. Naruto looked at his mother once more, and she was absolutely still. It was unnerving to him to see her this calm about the situation. Naruto. She started. I want you to stay up here, and do not interfere unless necessary. Kushina gritted out this order through her teeth. Naruto was about to say something but held his tongue, he nodded. She shot off like a bullet. Right, let's round up the whore. The bandit was suddenly cut off from issuing his decree. Oi, what's wrong? Asked another. The man who was giving the orders began to cough a bit, and something was leaking from his mouth. His eyes widened when he saw blood. He tried to take a step forward trying to tell them something, but as soon as he did, he fell to the floor dead. His head had been separated from his neck, and proceeded to roll away. The other men who were watching began to scream as soon as they had seen this, but soon their own voices had left them. They were being cut down without mercy by a red-headed demon. Naruto. He couldn't help but be amazed and horrified at the same time. His mother was not leaving any survivors, and even though it was a gruesome scene, he understood it needed to be done. He kept watching from his vantage point when he heard something in the brush. He focused on the area he thought he heard it, and he was rewarded. Out came a girl who appeared to be about his age. She was scurrying across the forest. He was going to call for her to stop, but a man came bustling from the same bushes chasing her. The blonde stopped breathing for a second, and looked back to his mother. She was still busy destroying this group of bandits. His breathing came back but at a much quicker pace, and it was then he decided what to do. He stopped crouching on the tree branch and stood tall. He took off to where he saw the girl, and would try to help her. He was extremely nervous about doing this, but he wouldn't be able to live with himself knowing he could have done something. A scream resounded throughout the forest, and he took off even faster than before. He finally located them, and the man had her cornered with her back to a tree. It was now or never. Oi, why don't you handle somebody your own size? Both man and girl stopped when hearing the strange voice. The man quickly brandished his sword and turned around, momentarily forgetting about the girl. Who's there? Show yours. The man had been knocked aside from his blind spot as soon as he had turned away from the girl. He bounced a few times from the hit and hit his head hard against the trunk of a tree. The man was out cold. This guy was weak, thought Naruto. The girl was rooted to her spot, and could not move a muscle. Are you alright? Said a light and smooth voice. She looked to her left and saw a person who she assumed was the one who hit the man away from her. Slowly nodding her head, she heard him release a sigh from behind his mask. That's good. I wouldn't have been able to forgive myself if something happened to you when I saw you running. A red hue appeared on her cheeks, but it quickly vanished. Thank you for saving me. She managed to mumble out. He nodded his head and told her to follow him back to her little town. At first she was hesitant, but he reassured her it was safe by now. Reluctantly she followed. There were no survivors from the massacre that just taken place courtesy of Kushina, nor were there any from the first raid either. Men, women, and children had perished. The bandits had started to kill the women when they saw someone killing their comrades. She couldn't save anyone. Ka-chan, hollered Naruto's voice. She looked up to see her son, but was very surprised to see a girl following him as well. Is she a survivor? Kushina embraced her son as soon as he got within range of her. She held him for a few seconds when she asked him who his friend was. He hesitated for a bit, but ended up spilling what he had just done. Anger was her first emotion at him doing something stupid, worry that he or she could have been killed, and finally she was proud of him. He risked his life to help someone else. The redhead looked to the girl. She looked to be about Naruto's age, but what caught Kushina's attention about the girl were her crimson eyes, and red hair. The girl's hair and dress style aside, she had a feeling about her. What's your name, sweetie? Kushina asked in a motherly tone, a complete contrast to what she had been doing a few minutes ago. My name is Karen. The girl now named Karen stuttered out. No surname. This time it was Naruto who asked. My parents told me not to mention it to people. They were afraid we would be attacked if they knew our last name, explained Karen. Now that baffled Kushina. Why would they hide their last name, unless her parents believed that somebody was still after them? This just further added to Kushina's growing certainty. Can you tell me what it is? She already had an inkling, but needed to be sure. Karen hesitated a bit and looked at both the woman and at the other one. My last name is Uzumaki. That froze both mother and son, and they both couldn't help themselves, they laughed. Why are you laughing? We're sorry, but it was good fortune that my son found you. Hello, my name is Uzumaki Kushina. Hello, it's nice to meet you. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto pulled his hood back and greeted a family member. Karen was shocked at hearing this, and couldn't help but let a few tears drop from her face. She still had some family left in this world. Arms wrapped around her small frame and looked to see the woman hugging her, and she let her emotional bridge collapse at that moment. The two stayed like that for a while, and Kushina quietly asked the girl how she was able to escape what others couldn't. What she heard astounded her. This girl is a very powerful sensor. What are these? Kushina felt some bumps on the girl's skin. Karen explained that when someone bit her, they suddenly got better. The older woman blinked a few times, not sure if she heard correctly. She had only heard about such a thing once in her lifetime, and she thought it was nothing but a myth. However, this girl here claimed she could do it, and she had no reason to lie to her. Kushina got up and put Karen on her back and told her to hang on. Where are we going? Back to our home, away from home. Uzushiogakur. As they had been traveling, making their way back to Uzu, Kushina explained the situation to Karen. She asked the girl if she had any other family, but to her disappointment she did not. Oh well, 3 Uzumakis are better than 2. Kushina offered the girl a place with them when they went back to Konoha, and she accepted, stating she had no other place to go to. And she liked the both of them very much. The red-headed mother was very happy to hear this, and would train the girl if she could. Or perhaps Tsunade would be interested. Kushina was by no means ignorant or naive, and knew the girl could be a trained killer. However, her kunoichi and maternal instincts told her the girl was no threat, and she always listened to her instincts. They've saved her life on more than one occasion. The three went into the house, and proceeded to lay down on their beds, falling asleep. 3 months later. 3 months had passed since Karen had come to live with the 2 other Uzumaki, and in that time Naruto and his mother, along with Karen sometimes, had taken a few more missions so they could both get used to the nuances of the missions while working together. Most of their missions bordered on the mundane, and very rarely would things heat up like that first one. However, today was something different. Naruto was going solo today, he was ready. It was now July, and only 3 more months on the island until the full 12 months came to pass, meaning they would be back in Konoha on the first day of October. Naruto was standing gaunt in front of his mother with Karen just a ways off. What's my mission? He asked, awaiting her response. She really didn't want to give him this, but knew that this was something he needed to experience now rather than later. Extermination. He needed to experience his first kill against someone who was tiers lower in skill than he was rather than someone who was leagues above him. His eyebrows rose in surprise, but quickly brought them down. His pulse had quickened as his chest rose up and down very quickly. He was finally being tasked with eliminating someone. What am I exterminating? He asked quietly. Bandits. Even though he knew these men did not have shinobi training, it was still a frightening prospect for him, fighting another man to the death. Where? Was his only question. A few miles west of here. Your mission is to eliminate any and all bandits so they may never terrorize others again. She hoped that her last sentence would give him the drive needed to do the deed. She knew he could take them down, but not entirely sure if he could kill them. So other people are depending on me as well. I don't want there to be a repeat of what happened to Karen. His resolve was starting to strengthen when he thought about this. He couldn't mess this up or he would be responsible for the deaths of others. Naruto nodded his head and looked at his mother straight in the eyes. Right, I'll go and get my things. Kushina knew he would be able to do this if the look he just gave her was any indication. However, just because she thought of this didn't mean she wasn't worried about him. She instructed both Anbu to follow her son. Unfortunately, it would interfere with their primary mission of protecting them both if both of them left, so it was decided that one would go watch while the other stayed to protect Kushina and Karen. Neko was chosen by Kushina as she acted in a much more professional manner than her counterpart. Later that night, a lone figure was moving within the darkness as he traversed the canopy on his way to complete his mission. Naruto had left Uzu as soon as the sun had set, and the darkness had descended upon the land. He was wearing the same gear when he had gone out on all of his other missions. At the speed he had been moving at, he finally came to his final destination in a little under an hour, give or take a few minutes. He could see a dim light from a fire as he kept inching closer and closer. Pausing for a moment, he took a deep silent breath, composed himself and exhaled. He needed to be focused on his task. Let's see here, 2, 5, 8. A total of 8 bandits, counted Naruto. How should I go about this? Perhaps just shooting fireball after fireball, no, that wouldn't work. I'll have to do this silently or as silent as I can be, he told himself. So he began to watch them, their interactions, habits, etc. He waited patiently, making sure he did not alert any of them. A few minutes passed before his first target had been selected, and coincidentally it just happened to be the leader. How lucky can I get? The man had gotten up, and for whatever reason decided to announce he was off to take a leak, and he would be back in a few. This is it, Naruto told himself as he was bracing himself, silently stalking his target, waiting for an opportunity. The man began to unzip his trousers, and now both of his hands were occupied. Now, he shifted his weight so he could begin his descent, and was now behind his target. He was standing on the tree vertically, and quickly produced a kunai from his holster. And simultaneously he placed his free hand over the man's mouth while plunging the cold hard steel into the man's jugular. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. He kept repeating over and over in his head. The man was squirming, trying to get away, but at the rate he was losing blood it was a futile effort. He finally stopped twitching. Wiping away a few stray tears from his face for what he just did, he calmed himself down, and he resumed his mission. Bunshin no Jutsu, he intoned. A single clone came into existence next to him, and transformed into the now deceased leader. He explained what he wanted the clone to do, and it went to work. Naruto grabbed onto the body that was beneath his feet, and stashed it in a spot nobody would find it. After a few seconds he heard some rustling coming from behind him, telling him that his clone was very close with the others. Naruto retreated back into the shadows. So what did you want to show us out here? Spoke one of the bandits, directing the question to the disguised clone. The real Naruto channeled chakra into his eyes, turning on his dojutsu. Whistle. The men heard what sounded like a bird chirping, and each moved their head in the direction it came from. Each looked into the red eyes of what they thought was a demon in the shadows. Megan. Kasagui no Jutsu, demonic illusion, shackling stakes technique. Naruto peered at each men as they each stared into his eyes, and sent his own chakra into their system. A few seconds passed when all of the men let out a blood-curdling scream, and hit the floor unconscious. First part done, moving on to the next. He braced himself as he was getting ready to repeat the same process. He reached behind his back, and lifted up the back part of his cloak, pulling out 2 black kodachi. This next part was going to be messy, but he went ahead and did it anyway, just as he did to the first man. The mission was finally done, and he released the breath he had been holding since he had trapped these men. Just as he was about to burn the bodies he felt something in the air, and quickly moved from his position. Futon. Senpuken, wind release, whirlwind fist. Naruto dove to the side, completely avoiding being turned into a smudge on some tree. He quickly recovered from the attack, and blades at the ready was ready to defend himself. Nice job avoiding that, complimented a voice from the shadows. He did not turn his head, but he had his eyes roaming the entire tree line to see if could find the person who attacked him. He was fortunate that both his mask and hood hid his eyes from view, and you could only really see them if the person was up close. Plus he couldn't afford to turn them off right now as he was fighting someone who could mold chakra. Laughing was starting to resound throughout the area when he finally spotted a body. The person in question was a head shorter than the silver-haired Anbu agent, and he couldn't make out any identifiable features due to the shroud covering the man's face. Don't banter back with enemies, Naruto. That was one lesson all of his teachers had drilled into his head. He did not bother to respond to the compliment, and chose to stay quiet. Not much of a talker, huh? Quipped the voice. I can understand that. Well, I might as well just kill you now since you already finished the job I was assigned to do. Rokusho Aoi. He stated before vanishing. Naruto's body tensed for a second as he was prepared for the man to suddenly just disappear while talking. He felt a foot impact his chest, and he skidded back a few feet away from his attacker, but soon noticed something strange. Why is it that all I felt was a dull sensation from his attack? He rubbed his chest but felt no pain, and would check on this later. He mentally cursed himself for freezing when the man had vanished from his sight. His eyes had tracked the man, but with his body locking up on him there was nothing he could do. He erased his doubts, and went on his own assault. Futon. Agawa wind release, stream. Naruto gathered chakra in his mouth, and blew out a gust of wind directly onto the ground beneath him. He gave rise to a large dust cloud that completely obscured himself from his enemy. Unless Aoi had a dojutsu of some kind, he would not locate Naruto. He would need to wait until the cloud had settled before he could attack again. Naruto, however, had no such limitations and would press his advantage. Tiger, ox, dog, rabbit, snake, futon. Daitapa wind release, great breakthrough. Naruto clasped his hands together, and applied a significant amount of chakra. He exhaled a giant gust of wind that not only knocked down a few trees, but had surprised Aoi and knocked him down as well. This was the chance Naruto needed, and he would take advantage of it. Remember Naruto, said Itachi. If your opponent is down, you always take advantage of it. If not, it may come back to bite you. Were the words that suddenly came to Naruto. Onmyo Hashi, dusk to dawn strike. Naruto threw his first Kodachi at the downed man, and waited a couple of seconds before throwing his second one, which was hidden behind the first. Only the most swift of people could completely avoid both blades, and Aoi did not prove his swiftness. The first blade had grazed him, but the second had rung true, and pierced his shoulder. Aoi began to scream. Ah, damn it. Aoi cursed in his head as he focused his attention on taking out the blade. He took his eyes off of Naruto, who had already finished weaving his hand seals. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, fire release, great fireball technique. Aoi had gritted his teeth, and forcibly yanked out the blade and tossed it aside. He was going to grab hold of his strongest weapon, but finally did he notice the giant fireball coming to light him ablaze due to his stupidity. His body began to quiver in fear, and his body was not responding due to this. I underestimated this guy, were his last thoughts. Naruto watched as his attack traveled through the air, landing a direct hit on his target. He wanted to look away from the man who was now burning to death because of him, but out of some form of respect for the soon-to-be dead man continued to watching, and hearing the man's wails of pain. Thinking back on it now, he wished he had just put Aoi in a genjutsu like the others, and been done with him like that. Neko. She watched silently from her viewpoint, and she was very impressed with her short-tenured student who had methodically taken down the traitor. Granted that the man was a jonin in name, but his skills were subpar, which she ranked at low-level chunin at best. And she knew from experience that the blonde was well above that, and would only continue to grow. The bandits weren't much of a challenge for him, and he took care of them with stealthily with a hint of subtlety. She couldn't be more proud of him than she was at that moment. She was also impressed with his prowess in the art of illusions, and she might even introduce him to her friend later on so they could chat about it. His ninjutsu is very good as well. Hee, how funny would that be? A kid twice as young as her completely outclassing her. Neko grinned behind her mask at the thought of seeing that. She took note that Naruto was now hunched over with his hands on his knees. Is he sick or something? She shrugged her shoulders, and decided to move a few feet back so as to not attract his attention. She would follow him when he left, but for now she would scout the area out for any other possible threats to her charge. Naruto. His breathing was getting a bit heavier until he could take it no more, and took a deep breath to calm himself down. Gathering himself, he continued his job and dragged the bodies into one spot and lit them on fire. He hunched over with his hands placed on his knees when a sensation was beginning to rise from the pit of his stomach. Bleg. He began to empty the contents of his stomach. This was mostly due to the realization that finally caught up to him. He had taken away multiple lives today. And the stench of burning flesh hit his nostrils full force. With his stomach now empty, he wiped away the spittle around his mouth. He slowly walked over to the charred corpse of Aoi as he had seen the man take something out before his fireball had hit him, and wished to know what it was. He began to search around the body, and hoped the man still didn't have it on him. To his relief, he found something that was a few feet away from the body, and picked it up. I wonder what this is. It was a hilt that was missing its blade. He grew curious and applied some chakra into it. He was thoroughly surprised. Snap hiss. With a hiss out came a yellow blade made completely out of lightning. He couldn't quite believe just what he was holding in his hands. He continued to gaze at the legendary blade. The Raijin no Ken, sword of the thunder god. Naruto spoke with reverence in his voice. This was the very blade that had once been held by the Nadaime Hokage, Senju Tobarama. This is definitely coming with me. Naruto abruptly stopped applying his chakra, and the blade began to recede. He stored it away, and would show his mother later. I think it's time I head back. Uzushiogakure. Naruto arrived back in Uzu in the dead of night, and just a few hours before sunrise. It was quiet as he made his way to his home, and would be glad to see his mother and Karen there waiting for him. He entered his home, but as soon as he saw his mother he made his way straight to her, and hugged her fiercely while sobbing a bit. He didn't care if Karen was watching. Kushina was taken aback by the sudden show of affection, but returned it with the same amount of ferocity. She had a look of worry on her face. What's wrong, Sochi? Naruto stayed quiet for a moment, and took a few seconds to mentally compose himself. Finally he was calm, and he began to tell his story from the beginning up to and including how he killed each man. The adult Uzumaki couldn't help but be impressed and worried for her son at the same time. Karen was sad that he had to go through and do such things, and quietly moved to his other side, hugging him as well. Kushina smiled at her attempt at comforting him. So not only did he take down 8 bandits, but he even took down a rogue shinobi. Her grip around him tightened. Shish, she comforted him while stroking his hair. I know I had already told you this, but if you didn't kill them then there might have been a repeat of what happened with Karen. She whispered this to him. He understood the ramifications had he not killed them. It was a what if scenario, but it was better to be safe than sorry. It still didn't make it any easier thought, he still ended lives. You should be proud of yourself since you killed a traitor of the village. She praised him for bringing the man down while recovering a very powerful weapon. Thanks Ka-chan. He mumbled. You're welcome, and do you mind if I take a look at the weapon? She asked. He nodded his head at her request. It's not every day you see a piece of history. Out came the legendary hilt, and he tossed it to her like it was a child's toy. She caught it, and studied it for a bit before applying her own chakra to the hilt. It awoke with its usual hiss, but in a very lackluster fashion. Quote. Shrugging her shoulders at this she decided to apply more, but no matter how much she tried to apply the blade would not grow brighter or longer. Well, it appears I'm not a suitable wielder for this weapon and will never wield it to its fullest capacities, she admitted. However, it seems that you are. She cut off her chakra flow, and tossed it back to her son. Wait, what? I already have 2 blades, and a third would only be a hindrance to the style I use. He pointed this out. What this means is that you are now the new owner of the Raijin no Ken. And what does it matter if you have a third blade? How useful would a hidden third blade be if your 2 Kodachi were destroyed during a fight? She countered. I see your point about that. He sighed. But this belongs to Konoha. Wrong. While it may have resided in the village it did not belong to it. It belonged to the Senju clan, and just who happens to be their last descendant? She asked him knowing full well he already knew. Tsunade Ba-chan. Correct. And you know she isn't going to start learning kenjutsu, especially at her age. Plus I don't think she would mind if you held onto it for a while for her. You're basically like a son to her just as much as you are to me. Naruto took a few seconds to think through her reasoning and found it sound. Understood. And just like that he was the next user of the Raijin no Ken. Good. I'm glad you understand my reasoning. Now I think you deserve some shut-eye. We will continue our conversation in the morning. He nodded his head, and went to his makeshift bed. While cool on the outside, she was a storm of emotions on the inside. She let loose a shallow breath as she had almost lost it during his story, and was glad she had controlled herself. She was going to up his training in the remaining time they had, but she would need to check on something first. I need to test something out in regards to his body not feeling that kick. She would need a scroll for this, but would need to search her mother's things for it first. In the time I've been here with the 2 of you I've never seen him like that. Karen brought Kushina out of her musings. Yeah. She sighed. Killing a few people for the first time will do that to someone. But he had the proper motivation guiding him, said Kushina looking directly at Karen. What do you mean? He didn't want what happened to you to happen to others. Kushina told the girl, and smirked at her stuttering. Kushina wouldn't have minded if her son or Karen decided to pursue a romantic relationship with one another, but after spending time with each other they became more akin to siblings or the like. Oh well, I can still hope. If Naruto grows to look anything like his father, I'll have many little Uzumakis running around soon enough. Kushina grinned at the prospect of having grand babies to spoil. I'll have to thank him for that. Good night, Kushina-sama. Karen warned Kushina. What have I told you about that? Good night. KK Ka-sama. Karen blushed a bit and ran to her bed while Kushina simply laughed it off. Life is good right now. Kushina smiled at her two children, and soon went to her own bed to gain some shut-eye. Following morning. It was now morning, and two growing children were busy eating the breakfast provided by their mother. Kushina had found her mother's scroll and wanted to test something out today, and had asked both Inu and Neko to give her and the two children a few hours to themselves. Both members saw no problem with this as they were sure the two redheads were going to talk to the blonde about last night since you don't get over something like that in a day. Plus it allowed them to check more of the village, making sure there were no unknown enemies lurking about. Kushina had already spoken to Karen about this little experiment a few hours before Naruto had awoken. She had yet to really explain the situation regarding his dojutsu though, but it seemed that Karen already had an inkling due to her sensor abilities regarding certain chakras. Truly a frighteningly perceptive ability. She was glad the seal or Naruto for that matter hadn't accessed or spoken to the Biju. I need to have a talk with him before we go back home about that. She addressed her son. Naruto, do you remember when you explained to me how it felt after Aoi kicked you? He tilted his head forward. It felt like a dull sensation. I felt the impact of the kick on my chest, but that was soon gone. He answered to the best of his ability as it was a hard feeling to describe. Right, now I want you to listen very carefully. She paused to see if he was listening. I want you to channel chakra to your chest, or more specifically the part that felt dull. Why? He gave her a questioning look like she was crazy. Kushina was growling a bit at being questioned. What was that? Did I hear you wanted me to kick you for not following an order? Just do it. She barked as she kicked him forward. Ow. He yelped. Okay. Geez. You don't need to hit me anymore. He held his hands up in defense. Naruto put his arms down and concentrated. He sent chakra to his chest as per the threat, and felt a weird sensation inside of his chest. Deciding to look down, he could see a few bumps there, like something was trying its hardest to escape. Now he was worried, and a little freaked out. Just what the hell do I have inside of me? Easy Sochi, Kushina said in a calm voice, clearly seeing the distress on his face. Just apply a bit more chakra, and we will have our answers, she urged. Calming down a bit, he nodded his head, and applied some more. He felt something pushing against his skin, something sharp, and finally it gave. He froze, and honestly had no idea what he was looking at. Wah! It was the only coherent word he could think of as a multitude of bones were sticking out of his chest. So it appears that you do have the Shikatsumiku. His mind finally caught up the words that his mother had just uttered, and no, he was not feeling shock or worry, but a giddiness. He had two bloodlines. I have two bloodlines. He was brought out of his moment of excitement when his mother handed him something. Here, try this technique. The blonde calmed down, and took hold of a scroll, opened it, and gave it a quick once-over. Where did you get this from? He inquired. From my own mother, who just like you had the same bloodline. It obviously skipped a generation in me, but not in you. So give it a shot, she explained while setting up a dummy for him to practice on. While she was doing this, she asked him a question. Do you know what the bloodline does? I'm afraid I don't. Well, from what my mother told me, it allows the user to infuse their calcium with chakra. By doing this, it allows them to manipulate the growth and properties of their bones to their liking. It falls under the category of taijutsu, kenjutsu, and a bit of ninjutsu, she explained to the best of her ability, and finished setting up the dummy. Go ahead. The blonde nodded to her. Does this mean I don't need my kodachi anymore? No, this just makes you much more versatile. If you ever lose your blades, then just use this technique, and you have new blades to use. Are there more than just this one technique? He asked. Of course. The only problem is that I don't know where the other scrolls are at, perhaps somewhere near Kiri, she answered. Naruto stored that information and began at a sedate pace towards the dummy. That pace soon turned into a sprint, and he briefly recalled the technique and where the spots instructed where to apply chakra to. Unagi no Mai, Dance of the Willow. With those final words uttered from his mouth, bones began to protrude from his palms, elbows, knees, and shoulders. There were a total of 8 finely sharpened bones ready to puncture or damage a body. He didn't seem to feel any pain as the bones had initially came out, and he swiftly approached the dummy, crossed his arms and swiped at the dummy's head. The head went rolling as the bone blades had made a clean cut at the baseline of the neck. His knee traveled towards the midsection, piercing the stomach and coming out the back. He finished by bringing out his knee, and started to spin as rapidly as he could, completely shredding what was left of the dummy. He was in a state of absolute euphoria before being snapped out of it. Huh, did you not hear me calling for you to stop after the target had already been mutilated? She asked with arms crossed over her. Whoops, hee. Sorry about that, I guess I didn't, he admitted sheepishly. She eyed him for a second longer. Alright, I'll forgive you this time, but don't let it happen again, she warned him. So how was it? Did it hurt? She asked curiously. He thought about it for a second, trying to come up with the best possible way of explaining this. It felt exhilarating. When my bones came out, and when I got up close and personal, I just saw my opponent in front of me, and nothing else mattered to me at that time, he answered, recalling his exact emotion at the time. I see, well, just keep practicing this move so that you get it down. However, make sure to do it in secret, or ask Karen to sense if anyone is near the two of you. The less people who know, the better. Kushina did not want anyone else besides the three of them to know this. He arched an eyebrow in confusion, and wasn't quite sure why he had to keep this one a secret, but followed the order nonetheless. It would soon be a full year in a few months. 3 months later, 3 forms could be seen moving at mildly high speeds as the group was making their way back to Konoha. It was the morning of the first day of October. It had officially been a full year on this exact day, a full 12 months. In the last 3 months, Naruto had come to terms with what happened long ago, and had taken a few more missions that required he kill. It's not that he found it easier to kill a person, it was still hard, but he recognized it as a necessary thing in their world. His progression in the first dance of his second bloodline was at a mild pace at best. It required him to be very agile when in use, and was now thanking his mother for the training he had received from her. It was trying to hide it from the 2 Anbu that was slowing his progression, and he didn't practice it outside of Uzu when he went on missions. It was the statement from his mother, "You never know who could be watching," that had halted that idea. We're finally going home. Naruto was happy as he was going to soon see some familiar faces soon. The trio mostly traveled in silence while the 2 Anbu were out of sight. Naruto broke the silence. Do you think anything interesting happened in the village while we were away, Ka-chan? I'm not sure, Sochi. We'll have to ask around to find out. Naruto nodded his head, and suddenly decided he wanted to get home faster. So he picked up the pace, leaving the other 2 behind. Kushina frowned at seeing this. He said he wasn't mad or anything when I talked to him. Or did he lie to me? Nah, he wouldn't do that to me, he probably just wants to get home sooner. Kushina was convinced that was it, and briefly remembered their talk. Flashback. Kushina was silently watching her son practice his new bloodline while Karen was meditating, honing her sensor abilities. She was glad the young Uzumaki girl was taking this seriously, as the girl did not want to have to go through what she already went through again. She released a sigh as she was now going to have an awkward conversation with her son. Might as well get it over with. Naruto called out Kushina, grabbing his attention. Yeah, he hollered back. I need to discuss something very important with you. Naruto stopped what he was doing and looked at his mother. She was being serious right now. She was using the "don't make me tell you twice or I'll punch you" voice. He scrambled over to her location, and heard some footsteps from behind him. Turning around, he spotted Karen trailing behind him. The adult Uzumaki was also a bit taken aback by Karen suddenly getting up and following her son. But now that she thought about it, she felt that the girl should know as well, especially if she was going to live with them from now on. She just hoped Naruto wouldn't come to hate his father because of what she was about to explain to him. What's up, Ka-chan? I'm going to give you some information regarding certain events that have taken place in the past. All I ask is for either of you to not interrupt me while I explain this. Hi. They both chorused. She nodded her head. Naruto, do you remember all those years ago when we unlocked your chakra? She asked and received a nod. And do you remember telling me how you felt two forms of chakra at the time, a blue and red one? She received another nod. I do. I'm glad you do because I'm going to explain what that chakra was. Naruto was surprised to finally be learning about this, and leaned in. It all happened on the day you were born. There was an attack on our home, and your father defeated this enemy with the only option readily available at the time, by sealing it away, but he passed away due to the seal he used. She paused to let her words sink in. Naruto was thinking about this very hard, but had a question. What did he seal away? He sealed a biju. Now he was a bit confused. He briefly recalled reading something about a biju in a book that detailed Hashirama when he was Hokage. Then once more when, but this time with both Hashirama and Madara Uchiha. He had another question. What's a biju? Biju are titanic behemoths made of chakra that have a form of consciousness. There are a total of 9. She answered. Naruto's eyebrows were knitted together in concentration. If the biju are this powerful, then that means my father had to use an equally powerful seal, he murmured to himself. But then something came to mind, and a sense of foreboding came over him. If these biju are as powerful or as big as you claim, then what did he seal it into? I understand that some form of physics and geometry are applied when using fuinjutsu, but since this being is very huge and has otherworldly chakra, then a simple scroll would not suffice. He really has inherited his father's intellect. Kushina thought, smiling, but then sighed at what she was about to tell him. You are correct. Bijus are too big to simply be sealed within a scroll or any other inanimate object, in most cases. The majority of the time they are sealed within humans. The younger the more adaptable the biju will be to a human's chakra coils. How young? Newborns are preferable as their coils aren't developed yet. As soon as she had finished that statement did the pieces fall into place in his head. His father's death after his birth. Using newborns for sealing, and that strange chakra he found all those years ago. He sealed it into me, didn't he? He whispered out, but his words carried to his mother's ears. Kushina closed her eyes and exhaled a breath. He did. She confirmed. He believed that only you would one day be able to fully control the power of your biju. He told me so in his letter, which I'm sure says the same in yours. Naruto was silent as he fully digested the realization of the situation. He had once believed that his father had not left him any words as a normal father would to his son. But now that he heard that his father believed that only he could accomplish this, it just raised his respect for his father. He left me a letter. Where is it at? He did, and it's back home in Konoha. Know that you know all of this information. I can give it to you when we get home. He nodded his head, and couldn't wait to see what his father wrote for him. Which biju do I hold? He asked. You are the third Jinchuriki to the Kyubi no Yoko, 9-tailed demon fox, the strongest of all the biju, she announced. Now this news shocked the two youngsters, but Naruto raised an eyebrow. Third, Jinchuriki. He sounded confused. Jinchuriki means, power of human sacrifice, and yes, you are the third host. Uzumaki Mito-sama was the first, and I was recently the second, she said, surprising Naruto. He never would have thought his mother had also been in the same situation. So I know what you're going through, and if you ever want to talk about something, don't hesitate to ask me. Thank you, Ka-chan. You're welcome. However, now that you know this, I don't want you to try anything with it. Don't try to talk to it, access its chakra, or anything. I will teach you about it, but when you are a bit older and stronger. Understood. Hi. Good. That had been a very awkward situation, but she was glad he didn't hate his father. Instead, he chose to prove his father right by one day controlling the Kyubi's chakra. She was glad Karen was there as she was the first person he talked to after he learned this. That had hurt a bit, but she tossed it up to her being closer in age to him. She would wait patiently for him whenever he wanted to talk. She thanked the girl for being there for her son, and offered her some special training. She hoped that someone other than her would develop her chakra chains. Unfortunately, her son could not manifest them, but she hoped Karen could. For now, though, she would wait until they settled back down a bit in Konoha. She watched Naruto for a bit and came back to evaluate him once more, just like she did when they first left their home. He really has improved tremendously since the beginning of this trip. He was perhaps at low to mid Chunin when we left, but if I had to rank him right now, I would definitely say he was around low Jonin or perhaps even Tokubetsu Jonin in power alone. A few years and more experience is all he needs to surpass those who came before him. She grinned like a madman at the prospect of having raised and trained such a badass shinobi. They would praise her as one of the greatest teachers ever. She pushed those thoughts aside for the moment. You aren't going to beat me, TT Ebane. Come on, Karen. Let's go. She roared and took off in a sprint after her son. Karen merely shook her head and sighed at the two other Uzumaki's antics. The two Anbu also just sighed at their actions. This isn't a race. They both muttered. Kanahagakure. The group of 5 finally saw the village gates a few yards ahead of them, and the two hiding in the shadows broke off from them, and went to their leader. Meanwhile, the mother and 2 children combo proceeded to the gate to sign in. The 2 guards were wary of the second child, but a look from the adult Uzumaki shut them up, plus she mentioned she was going to take her to the Hokage anyway. The 2 men nodded somberly, and allowed them access to the village. Kushina and Naruto noticed that the 2 men had a certain air about them, but shrugged it off for now, and went to inform the Hokage they had finally made it back home. As they continued their walk, did they notice that it wasn't just the gate guards, but the entire populace of the village seemed to be in a somber mood. I wonder what happened while we were away. Naruto couldn't help but get a bad feeling about something. Those around the village that knew them or of them were greeting them like any normal person would, but they could all tell it was a forced greeting. They returned the greetings, but soon began to ignore it for the moment as they finally stood before the Hokage's building. They seamlessly moved around a crowd of people who were working in the same building, and finally they arrived at the man's door. Knock, knock. There was some shuffling heard on the other side of the door in the room. Enter. A gruff voice said. All 3 Uzumakis entered to see Sarutobi Hiruzen sitting behind the same desk, but something was very different. He looks like he's aged more than 10 years since we last saw him. Kushina and Naruto, to a degree, were caught off guard with the man's appearance. Snapping out of her stupor, Kushina spoke. Reporting in Hokage-sama, Uzumaki Kushina, Uzumaki Naruto, and Uzumaki Karen. We have returned from out training trip, she announced while introducing their newest addition. Hiruzen's eyes widened a fraction at hearing the name of another Uzumaki, and turned his gaze from Kushina to the girl. Karen started to squirm under the elder man's unwavering gaze, but released a sigh when he looked back to the older Uzumaki. I see. I thought you wouldn't begin the search until Naruto was a bit older. This wasn't a planned thing, it just happened. And this is only the first step to bringing more Uzumaki into my clan and Konoha as a whole, she exclaimed in a boisterous voice. Hiruzen was very tired right now and did not wish to deal with Kushina's antics right now, so he decided to move things along. Good. I trust the trip was a fruitful venture. Naruto tuned out his mother's reporting to the Hokage, and instead chose to study the old man. He could clearly see something was bothering the man, but he wasn't sure what. Whatever. Not like it pertains to me. Ka-chan. Naruto interrupted the 2 adults. Sorry for interrupting, but we're going over to the Uchiha district so I can say hi while introducing Karen to Itachi and Shisui. He announced, and was about to head out, but was held back by a long drawn-out sigh from the Hokage. Hiruzen really hated having to do this as he knew how close the 3 boys were to each other. I'm afraid that will be all but impossible, Naruto-kun. He spoke with a defeated voice. An uneasiness was starting to creep into Naruto. He turned back around, and looked the man straight in the eye. And why is that? The reason why is because there are no longer any men, women, and in this case children residing in that district. There were only 2 recorded survivors, and the reason for this is because your friend Uchiha Itachi has massacred his entire clan, and has become a missing nin.